Man is an interesting character for us. We've done Spider-Man, we've done X-Men, we've done superpowers.
Many of the Marvel properties have long histories in Hollywood. Iron Man was at least at Fox and New Line before coming back to us. And for whatever reason, you know, the time wasn't right.
It's been a different journey for Marvel since it's really their first real venture coming out as a company, fully financing and releasing Iron Man. And it's a big deal to be a part of this production. So much of the company is now invested into this potential franchise, which is really what these films are meant to be.
But we need a storyteller.
John is a talent in many fields, in front of the camera, behind the camera. But when you look at Maid and Elf and Zathura, that's a track of a filmmaker that is nearing the top of his game.
But very important for us with him is his love for Iron Man. That was the movie he wanted to make.
Iron Man is one of the comics where you have very few purists who have attached themselves to specific storylines. In the case of Iron Man, it's the myth of Iron Man, it's the suit, it's what the suit could do. Things change from time to time with the suit, but there's a basic character that Tony Stark has and a certain look that the suit has.
I went in to meet them and then wound up screen testing for Tony Stark for Iron Man. It was like, I went in the building and everywhere you go, there's another movie you love and the Spider-Mans and everything. I go, God, it'd be really great if I could do one of these.
It was kind of like an independent director and cast, but, you know, doing this great big film, so it was the best of both worlds.
I'm jealous.
Next time.
This is the part of the Marvel offices that they gave us for Iron Man pre-production. Normally, we would, you know, start this, we would rent some office space near a studio. We're about to move to Playa Vista Studios. So this allowed us to sort of get a running start and be close to the people who are part of Marvel Studios here. So it was nice. We had these great digs and we got to use the meeting spaces, and we're starting to outgrow this space. Here are some different, the evolution of concept art for the suit. These are earlier designs that we didn't go with, but they helped evolve the suit into the final look. The suit evolved over decades, and it wasn't until an artist named Adi Granoff took a whack at the costume and reinvented it that you found a suit that looked more like solid armor, more like something with a military application, almost like a flying machine, and not like a suit that somebody slipped on. It was skin tight and happened to be metallic. This suit felt real. It felt like something mechanical, something that was tech-based. And that was the image that I gravitated towards from the whole packet of 40 years of Iron Man images that was given to me.
The suit for the movie is completely different. In my artwork, I try to make things appear functional, but they're not functional because there isn't a real person inside. We spent months and months trying to figure out how different sections bend and intersect, and how there could be a person inside, and if he bends his arm, will it actually break his bones? And I mean, all those details like that. And then the helmet and how the helmet opens, and can the head fit inside the helmet, and then does the make the head look too big? I mean, all these things that in a comic book, I mean, I just draw it whatever looks the best.
We have basically the chest piece, which you see on one of the other renderings here, the abdomen piece, which would go on sort of like a tank top. You have the boxer shorts sort of area, and then the leg. And the whole idea is to make each of these components expand so that you can just slip into them as one big piece, and then as you put them on, they would collapse and end up snug on the leg.
Here's Ryan working on some keyframe work from the movie of Tony Stark first waking up in captivity. This is the beginnings of some thoughts for the beginnings of the first gray Iron Man suit. So you can see sort of the chest piece And as you can see, these arm pieces were inspired by this piece of hardware here.
This armature that we got from Stan Winston was basically a starting point to say how, what are the basic pivot points that you would need to be able to move your arms and have as much flexibility as possible.
This is also something that we use to help limit the movement that the performer used when we're doing some mocap tests for the CGI on it. This is sort of a dogfight sequence that happens late in the second act. As we can see, we're sort of cross-cutting between Rhodey, the pilots, and Tony Stark flying. And these have been color-coded and worked on and photocopied because this is part of what was used to be input into the animatic. This was all input into the computer and animated, and you're able to watch it like you would a movie.
I think very early on, John had a very compelling vision for how he wanted to cover the Iron Man action stuff. He wanted to shoot it like we took the Iron Man suit, turned it on, and basically we're flying beside it in a helicopter, and that's how we got Iron Man on camera.
The one thing that we still have over previs and animatics is that you can draw a scene really, really quickly, and you can draw changes really, really quickly, and as it should be. I mean, it's an exploratory part of the process to find the vocabulary of the movie and find the angles you want and come up with the coolest stuff possible.
If anything, that's the comic book artist who's sort of like, I'm just going to draw. I'm going to make this scene huge, and before you know it, it expands into something that's absolutely unmanageable, unshootable. It'll never go in any schedule. But what you can do from that is take the things in it that you respond to, and that's what John did.
So this is what I was hoping would be my office, but they made an appeal to me that this was the biggest room, so we need a room for all the previs crew. So you have animators, CAD artists, everybody who is involved with taking what we did on the storyboards and translating it into 3D animation. There are certain shots, like this is a really successful shot here. We like this one a lot. His little lights come on, his flying lights. They're coming into the Santa Monica Pier. Some of these are a little bit too quick, some of them are a little bit off. The flow is pretty good, but once we refine it in the previs, it will then translate pretty much one for one with the final film. We've seen flying in so many movies, especially through buildings in New York City. We wanted to put this one on the West Coast, where flight sort of began, where you sort of had Hughes aircraft, and sort of keep the tradition of him being a Howard Hughes type character alive. I really like this one, how he's flying over all the buildings. Really feels like you're flying up into space, into the stars. That's really cool. So when we're done with this, it'll actually, hopefully, translate into the actual movie. And we'll be able to watch some finished film while we're working on the movie and show it to the actors and the crew for morale. That's really great. And the camera shake is pretty strong. That's really good. See, this is exciting. This gives me goosebumps. You're not even fighting a bad guy here. All you're doing is really flying through the air. As I was talking to the people doing the previs, the artists, the storyboard artists, the animatics, it was about how do you really viscerally make you feel as though you're flying? We've all dreamt about flying. How exciting is one of those dreams? It's never boring. I think just the feeling of flying for the first time in a movie like this, if you handle it right, should give you chills. Just seeing him fly, really feeling like you're flying with him, if you cover it the right way, shoot it the right way, and present it to the audience in the right way, it should be an emotional experience. And then when you fight the bad guy, even more fun. But don't blow past that stuff. What's it really like? What would it really be like to get in a suit that could fly? It would be a life-changing experience. Don't lose sight of that. You're making a movie. And movies are about emotion. They're about allowing the audience to experience something they can't in real life. But let them experience it in a real way. And that's the hope. The hope is to ground this thing in reality wherever we can, because it's so superhuman. These heroes are so larger than life that any opportunity we could find to sort of screw it down to reality, we would be hard-pressed to make a movie without taking advantage of those opportunities that you would really feel something about.
Generally speaking, if you're making a movie about a billionaire who can go anywhere and who can do anything and has any amount of money to do anything, and you have a restricted budget, and you have to try and create that world that he lives in, that's a big challenge.
He doesn't just have the G5, he has like the 737 private plane. You know, everything is elevated with him. It's not just a house, it's an insane mansion on the bluff in Malibu on a cliff. And so there was a lot of fun in designing, location scouting, casting, shooting. You get to play a little bit of fantasy because when you think you've got something that's enough, you amp it up more.
When we were looking for a place to film, you know, there were a lot of possibilities. Marvel doesn't have its own lot yet. Maybe someday they will. And so we're looking for stage space that was large enough and in the Los Angeles area. And one of the places where a lot of films have shot is here at Playa Vista. And we thought it was really cool because this was the place that the Spruce Goose was originally built. It was Howard Hughes's old assembly factory and his headquarters for some time. You know, it wasn't lost on us that the legacy of Howard Hughes was, you know, sort of alive and well here. And Tony Stark is a little bit of the heir to the throne of the Howard Hughes reputation.
You know, for so long, the divisions were kept very separate. The film division out in Hollywood, which really was producing the films with other studios, was kept very, was separate from the publishing division where they make the comics, was kept separate from the animation division. And it was important to me to bring all those divisions together.
So there's multiple chambers, obviously, to this thing for the escape sequence.
Marvel Films invited a bunch of us out. You know, myself, Joe Quesada, Axel Alonso, our big editor brain trust, and a number of our key creators. It was a great thing even just to go out and be asked and to walk around the half-finished sets and see all the pre-production design. And, you know, it really makes you feel, just as a guy working at Marvel, that this really is our movie as opposed to a movie.
Is it too much of a shift to ask that he feels that he's fallen short of what his father's ideology
I think that's what we're beginning to imply, and we should imply further with either his alcoholism, his tardiness, his womanizing.
Working in the comics for so long, and sometimes watching the movies and going, that wasn't quite right if they just stayed a little closer to the source material. So part of our being there was saying, guys, how far are we away from the source material? How do we steer it back? Is it okay to steer away this way? And how do we just make this the best possible movie?
And I think also for Pepper, she has to realize that the moment that kiss happens, she's the glue in his life. She, you know, without him, the whole thing derails.
We had two great writing teams on this film. Art Markham and Matt Holloway came on and did some early drafts for us and continued throughout the process on and off. And Mark Fergus and Hawk Otsby came on board as well. They had worked with John on a film he had developed at another studio, didn't end up moving forward.
Marvel Comics has been really fantastic about giving us the whole history, teaching us everything we could ever want to know about the characters, and then saying, you know, feel free to explore around those parameters.
Yeah, when you see Zathura, you'll love this right there.
We made a decision early to go with Stan Winston Studios to design with us the Iron Man suits.
That's going to be too kicky. Yeah. And that's too matty. I like the brush feeling on it, too.
I'd like to say, gosh, everybody was just clamoring after us to do Iron Man, but the fact of the matter is that the minute we heard that Iron Man was being made, we went after it. We're all Iron Man fans. It was like the perfect thing for the studio. So we went after the show, and at just about the time that Jon Favreau was signed to actually direct it was when we took our first meeting with Marvel, and Jon was in that meeting.
This particular film was a little bit more interesting because there was already a design idea or a series of design ideas in place. They had conceptual drawings of Iron Man that fit a certain body proportion and a certain body type. So we had to inherit those and then bring them into our world and make them function. The big challenge was the fact that they hadn't cast anyone to be Iron Man.
And here it is. Here's the final.
And that's what we come to.
Here it is. Yeah. That's what we get for the amount we have to spend.
The journey you generally go through in the creation of a suit is you sit down with Stan Winston, his design team, our internal team, Favreau, the producers, and everyone starts with drawings and images, and you Photoshop and you get to sort of a 2D drawing, like a color drawing that you can hang up. That then gets moved to a modeling stage, to a 3D model, so you see a quick time of a model that turns. Then that goes to a clay maker, and then you see the first clay made of it, and it's something tangible now that you can touch and you can spin.
And we're convinced that a human head would actually fit in this thing, right?
The ears are right up inside, right up against the...
It's exciting. This is when you really get a sense of the movie coming together, when you start to see this. It's a bigger leap in some ways to go from an idea to this than to go from this to the actual movie.
And then there's generally a maquette that's made, which is a miniature desktop model of it, and it might be only 2 feet tall.
It's a work in progress, but it's coming along.
That's great.
Obviously, we don't have the wardrobe when we get with help.
And then you wait, and you know the next step is the suit. And it's the full-size, shootable, physical suit that a person's gonna get into.
I've never made a movie of this size before or of this genre. I've always been a fan, but it's a daunting undertaking. The day I knew everything was going to be okay was the day that Robert Downey Jr. was attached to play Iron Man.
That is gorgeous.
What Kevin's going to do, and they're going to take a cast of your foot so that it's a very low relief strap.
Stan Winston's reputation and Shane, the guys on that team, I've worked with them before. Every time you go into their shop, you go, oh my God, and they did that, and they did that, and AI, and this and that. And you see a history of films that I grew up on. The reason that I'm playing Tony Stark, the reason that I'm involved in Iron Man, the reason that I'm so excited is I'm crazy about movies. That's why I wanted to become an actor. That's why I could cry watching Chud, Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers. I buy into movies, I love it. I see The Fly, I don't care if that's Jeff Goldblum going, you know, I'm like, I'm in it. They're transporting, the fly's dying. I mean, I'm a sucker for this stuff.
Yeah, again, I'm just thrilled to land another gig with you. That's cool. Me too, man. The best thing I can tell you about me is ultimately I just don't do anything. Well, I'm sick. I'm out of here.
All right.
Later.
Get a good night.
Stan, thanks.
Good to see you, Rob.
Okay.
I'll see you soon. I walk in like a fan because I say it humbly because I really don't do it. I did it when I started. Now I oversee it. Shane oversees it. Everybody. I just enjoy it. I come in and it's easy for me to say, wow, that's cool. Do more of that. You know, make sure my name is on the screen.
How many gags are you doing?
We're going to do the inclined one
Yeah.
after this one, but this one right now you're more upright. We're just going to do a small blender section.
Hey, I don't like my little tummy there.
I'm not doing all this core work for nothing. That's all I'm saying. Behold the mass. I'm beholding the
We could hold off on this part. We are building a prototype while we're going. We've never built an Iron Man suit before.
Dude, you're zooming in on my hammer right now, aren't you?
Ease up on the hammer.
Twisted parlor games going down here.
And so you're given a launching gun, and then you have to hit the finish mark with the suit done. So it's not like we are ever able to kind of make one and then scrap it and make another one and make improvements and scrap that. And we have to actually work it all out and deliver at the time we're supposed to.
John, don't. Johnny.
Faster!
Thank you. Right now you're in the Stan Winston mold shop, the finishing shop. What you see behind me is where most of the parts are being modeled and parts are being painted. There's about 450 individual parts that make this suit. This is going to be the Mark II's chest. This is where the RT will go, and it's actually spray chrome metal, and it's been brushed. This is actually the process of putting in the rivets based on the design. And it's not really a polished rivet at all, it's just the illusion of a polished rivet. These are two pieces from the Mark III, and these are from our early test. This enormous calf that has sort of the accoutrement of like jet engines and things. But the foot goes in here, and then these panels had to be designed to slide and move. These are large sections of the Crimson Dynamo that are being made. This is a negative flexible mold, and these are just quickie temporary molds to pull out hard shells. What's interesting about what Trevor's painting is that this is a flexible paint for urethane that doesn't crack or buckle. and we have a lot of parts that are actually flexible. And it took a long time to get that to work. And this is Tim Nordella, who's mechanizing the Crimson Dynamo. There's a hatch that opens, revealing the sinister man who's inside. Eventually, it'll all be dressed like a very, very tight and down below, like the cockpit of a dive vessel. But right now, these are just the outer shells and sort of the escape hatch of this particular thing here.
When you work with someone like Stan Winston's company, so far, this is John and my second film with them. It's still a pretty magical experience when that suit's first rolled out. And Shane likes to put it behind a curtain generally and unveil the curtain in a very dramatic way, and there was Iron Man standing behind.
What do we do today?
I turned it on.
Voila! And then you look at it and you touch it, and it's sort of half excitement and half fear because it's very real. And generally you're pretty close to production at that point when that suit's shown to you. So hopefully your research was right, and the proportions all line up, and the textures are good, and the colors, and all the decisions you made along the way make sense.
Once you start to not see the whole guy, the proportions of him, and I think 235 is a good move here. I think it holds up really well.
When John first saw it, he was all smiles. I mean, he was really happy. Once the stuntmen had really become accustomed to the suit, when they started out, they were just a little afraid of damaging it, plates intersecting and chipping off paint and that kind of thing. But by the end of the day, he'd really gotten the full range of motion and had sort of learned to live in the suit. Those dailies at the end of the day were just amazing. I think everyone was just blown away.
Go ahead and turn it on, Brad.
You have to be strong and you have to be athletic to do this. It's like wearing very heavy football gear. Your endurance level has to be up for it because it's a double-edged sword. We have to make it light enough to move, but we have to make it heavy enough not to just completely, crack apart when somebody puts too much muscle into it.
So just do a, like the first guy, outside the door.
The Mark I with the flamethrowers and stuff was close to 100 pounds. Without the flamethrowers and the gas and everything on it, it was maybe 60 or 70 pounds. Okay, and roll camera. What it feels like you're doing inside the suit doesn't relate at all. When I'm walking, if I look down to see my mark at all, they notice. But when I roll my shoulders up and try to get the hero pose, they can barely see it. So it's taken a while to watch ourselves on camera to learn what it looks like and what the moves relate to. Another rotation, Mike.
Like right here it locks out. Here the weight comes down on my shoulder. So to be erect, is this what you're looking for?
Well, I just want to see it, to see if it, because right now we're seeing, I see you crouch, right?
Yeah. The hero poses kind of came from us just kind of striking poses and looking what looked best, and then them saying, yeah, hold that, and things from the comic book that they had took and poses they want, and then there were some that we came up with our own, and just different looks and, trying to show that you can see his character. If he's angry or if things are going good in the suit, they wanted to see that on camera. Roll camera. Action.
Yes, of course there's going to be a great deal of digital work that has to be done to bring something like this to life on screen. But the fact of the matter is these suits truly exist. And they are going to be there. And they're going to be on the set. And they're going to be actors. And we are going to see the real thing along with the digital thing. But when you as an audience are looking at it, screw you up a little bit so you really don't know what you're seeing. Is that real or is that digital? And then you let go.
My background as a filmmaker is not in this sort of genre. I've dabbled a little bit in special effects in Zathura and Elf, but really I come from more of an independent background, primarily a comedic background. And so I really wanted to offer a human side that would fit in with my sensibility of filmmaking. And in assembling the cast that I did between Robert Downey Jr. and Jeff Bridges, Gwyneth Paltrow, Terrence Howard, that's a cast that I would be happy to have in a drama or a comedy. And to be able to have them to support a bigger-than-life superhero really offers the possibility to exceed what people's expectations might be of this type of genre.
Listen to me. You are like a little child sitting next to its father in a car with a plastic steering wheel, turning the wheel, but its father's driving, Tony.
Well, then let me out of the car. Join me. Let's get there and let us start. We can raise all the funds we can. What do you mean?
I was the one who arranged the injunction, Tony.
You could have saved a lot of trouble if you just...
Did I hear you?
Yeah, no, that'd be great. That'd be great.
I think it was my my manager, David Schiff, was very excited about this project. He was telling me about Iron Man. I said, oh, who's directing? And he said, Jon Favreau. I said, oh, God, he's such a wonderful director, writer, and actor. I said, he'd be great to work with. And who's playing Iron Man? Robert Downey Jr. So, wow, so that's a pretty good team right there. And he said, keep me posted. This sounds like a good, something I'd like to get involved with.
We'll let you warm up a little bit, and then we'll start throwing a little movement into it.
Robert's a guy who is very disciplined in his approach to everything he does, and he's really gotten his body and his mind into a very, sort of clear, disciplined state, and that sort of carried over into how he prepared for the role.
Wherever direction is, just point kind of the opposite way, right?
Yeah, when you feel it going the other direction, act like you're trying to counter it. Okay, go the other, there you go, just like that.
I think he was very aware that he sort of had a burden in this film that he hadn't had before. He could sort of be charming and funny and come in and out of a movie and steal scenes in the past, but now he was sort of an iconic superhero.
It's good to eat about 10 minutes before this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I weight train crazily, and I do a lot of martial arts and yoga, Kung Fu, Wing Chun Kung Fu, but I was doing that anyway. About a year ago, I said, I really want to put on some size, which isn't easy when you're in your late 30s, and now I'm 41. I thought if I'm ever going to do a movie like this, I've got to do it quick before it's not embarrassing. But anyway, I feel like I've got a 5 to 7 year window, and then if it goes past that, then I'm sure all the optical stuff and CGI will have advanced to make you look better.
It's good. How's those legs, baby? Yeah, no, great shape. Legs are ready.
We wear this. That's fine. Towards me. Guide it across your face. Don't let your face get scratched on anything, all right? Robert Downey Jr.'s first reactions to the suit were extremely positive, and he was thrilled. So that made us feel good because it is him, after all. He has to feel comfortable being in it. He enjoys the process. He wants to be in the suit as much as possible, which is fun. Yeah, that's what I wanted to see, just kind of walking around.
Oh, they don't bend either, right?
No, they just...
Oh, I see.
They're basically rotational, right? They're rotators, and all the moves are hits are like this. Boom.
I thought I'd been training for all these years, and I was pretty butch, and I put on that Mark I suit, which is his kind of escape vehicle, and I almost had a personality meltdown. It also just gives me a great respect for the stuntmen and the guys who are doubling, or I don't even want to say doubling, but me and the other fellows who are really playing Tony in the suits.
Careful, actor at work, something just snapped off.
And I'm not claustrophobic, and it wasn't anything like that. It was just, I wore it for half an hour, and I kind of ran around, and the next day, I felt like my spirit had been broken. Like, I'm exaggerating, but it's like, these guys are seriously tough-ass guys.
Mark I suit days, we cancel the strength training.
The first time I saw him put on the helmet, I looked at him, and I said, Robert, you are Iron Man. I mean, how amazing is that? For the rest of your life, you are Iron Man. Nobody's gonna take that away from you. And he looks at me and goes, yeah, it's amazing.
I think we need to add some rust to it, but
Here we are.
3 RTs.
I love the lag bolts in there. That's great.
Well, we're right about to start shooting, and we're rehearsing now. We have the run of the set. We actually started shooting second unit We went down to the Santa Monica Pier and shot the Ferris wheel yesterday, and that was exciting because we crossed a couple shots off our list of the thousands we need. There's a stress factor that kicks in, and that starts to go away and diminish once you capture each shot and each scene on film.
I'm gonna tell you right now.
But right now, all there is anxiety, stress, and going over and over again your plan of attack on this movie that's certainly the biggest movie I've ever been involved in making. I think we have about a 74-day shoot, and day one is on Monday.
So Deborah, we're just talking about that.
Happy trails.
Or even really this one, but it'll be with all the details and stuff.
There's not a lot of variation of color in there, so if we could do anything just to maybe like little highlights of rust or something like that.
Here we go. And roll sound.
Sounds good.
Hey, Mark.
And action. Robert.
Robert really wanted to play Tony Stark, and I really wanted him to play Tony Stark. It wasn't the most obvious choice from a studio's point of view. Unfortunately, Marvel is a new studio with a lot of freedom. We weren't dealing with the classic studio system where they have their lists that they generate. There was a lot of freedom to cast the best person for the role, because fortunately with Marvel movies, the image of the superhero is in fact the big draw, the big star. And they've learned that they've had a lot of success in the past when they've hired people who are good, interesting actors and relied upon the name of the brand itself to sort of be the thing that becomes the rallying cry from a commercial standpoint. You then are able to try to make the best movie possible.
How dare you refuse the great objects of God? You're only alive because of his generosity. You are nothing, nothing! You understand me?
People have drawn parallels to the character in his own life, but that wasn't by any means the decision or part of the criteria by which we chose him. He's a tremendous American actor who has an incredible body of work, and I think has the personality of Tony Stark. He has the look that sort of matches with the comic books. There's sort of a childlike quality to Robert. There's an imagination to Robert that is very similar to Tony Stark, who's an inventor. There's a sense of humor to Robert, which Tony shared. There's a confidence. There were just so many qualities as you began to look through the history of the comic books and who Tony Stark was, and really who Robert is as an actor and as a person.
But allowed the great Genghis Khan to rule from the Pacific to the Ukraine.
The really fun part about the cave set is the dressing inside. What is life like when you're locked up in a room like that for like 2 or 3 months? And Robert, you know, brought a lot of his own personal experience to the cave too, which was fantastic. I mean, he taught us how you make tea in prison with the nice sock, or how you make coffee, how you play games, you make backgammon sets out of nothing, things like that.
With Robert in the Iron Man suit, we tried to keep it at a minimum for him. We'd try and keep it at a partial suit for him so he could do his acting, because it's so restrictive in that suit. And then we would let, you know, ILM fill in those blanks where the suit would be full.
Stop. Stop. Come on. Please. Get up. Get up.
As an actor, I've never gone through a process like this before, because usually you have a written page and you have a definite set idea of what it's going to be like. But we really found Jensen during rehearsals, sitting around the table and just talking. And the fantastic thing about this project has been everybody's been so open.
You maybe could shave about 90 seconds off your death would be nice, because it's a little uncomfortable leaning over there.
Well,
90
that's
seconds?
a lot of it.
You heard me.
Robert Downey is just a jewel. My girlfriend says, I think you're in love with him or something.
Here we go. Ready, and action!
This is our last day in here. And I remember when these walls were white and before there was set dressing in. And we were trying to figure out what the heck we're gonna do in here. And it's a really cool feeling, and sort of bittersweet, but satisfying when you say it's done. There's no more decisions to be made after 10 months of trying to figure out what we're gonna do. But we started off here, and now coming out of here, I feel like I understand who Tony Stark is more. I think Robert does as well. And hopefully, when this whole sequence is cut together, people will totally buy that Robert is in the Iron Man suit, that he built it, and it makes sense. But you don't know. I mean, now as we just finished, I haven't seen any of the scenes cut yet. But I know that every day's work was really good and really strong, and we did better than what was in the script. So I'm just shooting a close-up of Robert because we can, and then we're leaving the set behind for second unit to shoot a lot of action stuff. But this was fun. There's a lot of memories in here.
In the Mark I suit was mostly Mike Justice. Mike is a strong, fit guy, and in the very beginning, he would be in it for a couple hours, and he literally was spent. It was so hard to do. I mean, imagine carrying around almost 100 pounds on your whole body and being asked to move around quickly and do fight scenes. But as he did it more, he got more in shape to do it, and there were days where he was in that suit, 10, 12 hours. At the end of the day, he'd go, man, I feel pretty good.
Well, we finally got out of the cave, and now we're shooting at Disney Hall. It was designed by architect Frank Gehry. It's a very beautiful space. Should add a nice look to the movie. And since Tony Stark is an engineer and a designer, we felt that it was important that the locations tie into that sensibility. And when this was available to us, everybody sort of jumped at the opportunity. We have to shoot here at night, so it's going to be very gruesome, brutal shooting hours because we're shooting from dusk till dawn. And this is the first day that we're actually on nights, so I think people will be fading fast.
Mr. Stark, I was hoping I could get a reaction from you.
How's Panic?
I was referring to your company's involvement in this latest atrocity.
Hey, they just put my name on the invitation.
I say the names and then I say my name, and I'm like, holy crap. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's one of those moments, like I will leave set and I'll call my agent and I'll be like, okay, dude, here's how I'm gonna break it down today. I don't know, a man called Jeff Bridges. Yeah, in a scene with them. So it's exciting. And like last week I was like, yeah, a scene with Terrence Howard and Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, I'd check it. Like, it's so good.
Hey, Potts.
What are you doing here?
Just avoiding government agents.
Are you by yourself?
Where'd you get that dress?
Oh, it was a birthday present from you, actually.
God, I got great taste.
Yes.
You, want to dance?
Oh, no.
All right,
Thank you. No. The scene at Disney Hall was my first scene in the film. I had taken quite a lot of time off to be with my children and have babies and everything, so it was kind of intimidating the first scene back, to be in this extremely backless dress. It was good that in that first scene that Pepper was kind of nervous and feeling a little bit uncomfortable. I had always wanted to work with Robert. It had been kind of one of my lifelong ambitions. And when I was talking to Robert before I accepted the role, he said, aren't you tired of doing these great little movies that no one sees? Don't you want to be in a movie that people see? And I thought, yeah, that would be fun.
Greedy.
That's too much.
You're a greedy human being.
Stan, can we get you for the B-roll? Is everything okay here for you? Are we taking care of you? Or?
I have never been taken care of this well in my life. I'm just a little bit upset knowing that eventually we're going to have to go on there again and do some acting.
Who's the best director of any Marvel movie?
Well, not only the best, but as far as I'm concerned, Jon Favreau
That's
is
right.
the only
Okay.
director. Unless some other director gets me a half a dozen pretty girls.
Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to witness the art. Fantastic coconut. We like to keep them a bit wet, as they look even more fantastic. And action! How's it going, Hef? Oh, sorry. Thought you were someone else.
It's okay. I get this all the time. Now then, so I get it right, probably.
Cut. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a camera wrap on the creator of Iron Man.
All right, Stan Lee.
So when you hinge, I'm trying to get a camera over your right shoulder to get him. I have another camera over his right shoulder to get you.
So what would you? So I should be on this spot. This is where you like it.
Yeah.
I never shaved my head. Always wanted to. I saw the comic book character there, and I said, "Oh, well, this, I'll do this. I'll talk to John about it." And John says, "Well, don't feel like you have to shave your head." And I said, "Oh, really?" I kind of wanted him to say, "Oh, yeah, you got to shave your head," but he didn't. So we kind of chipped at it. We kind of took it down steps at a time. And finally, took the plunge and shaved it all off, and it felt, the most Obadiah-like that way. Hey, what a surprise.
I'm not going to say anything.
Is that good? I got that.
I'll see you inside now.
All right, okay, yeah. And, she's got a lot to talk about. Listen.
They say the best weapon is one you never have to fire. I respectfully disagree.
I prefer the weapon you only have to fire once. That's how Dad did it.
That's how America does it, and it's worked out pretty well so far.
Wide out the whole frame.
Yes! For your consideration, the Jericho.
The Jericho, 1001, 1000, bang.
All right.
I like the test.
This here's Lone Pine, and it's doubling for what we're suggesting are the mountains of Afghanistan. I think they did Gunga Din out here. I know they did a lot of westerns out here. This particular angle works really well for Afghanistan, but if you look different ways, different rock formations make you feel like you're out in the west. Here we're on protected land, so there are a lot of parameters that we have to observe to shoot here, but the trouble that we went through is well worth it because it really gives you a look like we traveled halfway around the world.
When you get to work with the guys at the top of their field, you just go, okay, that thing's going to blow up in the back of me, and I'm going to be okay. Or you get hit with like a little frag and everyone runs over because you're like, the star of the movie, and you're like, my God, man, 10 years ago I could have gotten knocked off my ass and have stuff stuck in my skin, and people would be like, all right, back to one. Because if you're not down, then you're not out. I was pretty blown away by how much we were able to do at such close proximity, but I'll tell you, it definitely helps you kick up some dust when you know what you're running away from. John brought everything. John is the primal force behind Iron Man. He's easily half the character. He's infused himself into every department. I won't say he's a gentle giant because he's very formidable, but he is the most composed person in a position of unimaginable stress that I've ever seen. He's so gracious and so evolved.
Robert, you're just such a good actor. You got that?
That said, he's a pain in my ass. He's checking his goddamn BlackBerry and texting and putting things up on MySpace while I'm out there dying. But he's that kind of big brother too. You know, it's like he didn't call me out to, you know, pitch for his team and then like come and, you know, ice my wrist when it got sore. He's like, you're a grown man, this is gonna be really hard, I told you it was. And sometimes I'm 1,000,000% there for you, and sometimes I'm just gonna watch you do whatever you're gonna do. Because it's not up to me to take care of your feelings. You're a grown man.
Oh, that's pretty good. I tell you. It's pretty good.
Working with actors in the military sense, I don't try to make them warriors from the ground up. What I do is I focus in on the skills required to shoot the scene. They are actors after all. They only need to know how it's done, and then as actors they will pick up on it.
I started just pushing down, and you know, these things are firing like 40 rounds a second. And I'm holding it down, but that will make the barrel very hot. You know, so you have to do it in bursts. And his whole thought was, die, mother, die, mother. Huge gun, I mean, you feel your teeth shatter afterwards. It's incredible.
Thank you, everybody. Crew of Iron Man, excellent week. Really great week, guys. That is a wrap.
What's on here, Coach? A little windy today. Wasn't like this when we scouted it. We're going to shoot Tony landing in the sand dunes after he escapes from the cave, and then walking through the desert. We got 2 Marine helicopters coming out here. I don't know if we're going to be able to land them.
Here we go. Pictures up.
It was sandstorming and it was kicking up so hard, and I just remember laying there buried waist deep in all this gear. And I just remember I was inside the helmet, and I just had this great moment of gratitude to kind of the elements and what a privilege it was to be able to be there playing this guy with the caliber of people I was working with.
Special effects. We got this.
We need 3 cakes to fill all the candles. Light it up.
I just said, wow, man, what a cool deal. What a cool suit, what a great crew, what a blast.
Yeah. Come on now.
Tony Stark.
Okay, there's a cut. Yeah, quick. They're clear. Wardrobe, there's a boot down there. See you on the next location.
We've been out here in the sand dunes. It's been a windstorm. There have been a couple of semis slipping over on the highway. The winds were kicking up to about 50 miles per hour. So everybody's making do. We all goggled up, and everybody's been a real trooper, and they're out here working. We've had cranes swinging out of control, and today we're just on sticks because it was just too windy for any equipment more than that. The highway's closed. They flew them in.
Just a brutal day, very indicative, honestly, of what the circumstances are like in Afghanistan. So it actually kind of, you know, rang true, I guess, to what things are really like there.
Well, 395, something must have flipped, and they had to send a helicopter for me.
Yeah, how was the ride?
It was incredible. The doors are open. My assistant almost cried.
We brought in a couple HH-60 Pave Hawk helicopters.
Action, Robert.
We're actually, you know, pararescue men and real helicopters and shooters on that, you know, that do that stuff for real, came in and were part of that scene.
When we get out of that helicopter, the first breath you take in is half filled with sand. And your lungs fill up with it immediately. And the cameras are on you, and we've got 10 minutes to get this whole shot. And you've got to run across the desert. Now, if anybody's ever ran in the sand on the beach, they know how hard that is. Now imagine running up a sand dune with your lungs half filled with sand.
The second day, when Raza recovers the suit, the winds were so violent that we couldn't really use any equipment. And Lou Desposito, our executive producer, was like, you know, let's go to a recover set, as you would if it rained. I felt that all of that wind, that heavy wind, was a very haunting image, and so we put goggles on all the bad guys and wrapped them with scarves so that, you know, to help protect the performers, and also that's really what they would wear, and we just let it play. And as a result, it has such a great visual quality that if you wrote that into a script, you could never really achieve that. You can't put enough Ritter fans in there to make that kind of wind, but when it really lands there in your lap, I think as a director, you have to take advantage of those opportunities.
Time for Iron Man to get out of Dodge.
This walk of destruction, what is it like being inside that suit, shooting flames with the armor on? How does it feel?
It's an awesome feeling. It feels powerful. You're just burning stuff, nothing. You almost have a false sense of security because you really feel super protected by the suit in the way that the boys over at Stan Winston designed it. I can move pretty well in it for as much as it weighs, and the special effects guys rigged me up, just making me look like a bloody stud so I can flow out some flames, and it's an awesome feeling.
Take a couple of hits, and then, like
you know what? It's history. This one I'm doing for my kids. They're gonna watch this and go, "That's you, Dad?" I'm just like, digging. Hi, Taylor. Hi, Tristan. Hi, Mom. Awesome. I love this. Just from wear and tear, we got a little tear in one of the lines and it spit fuel, which being under pressure kept spraying on my legs, and I ignited. And I kind of felt, well, that feels a little hot. Maybe not. Yep, it's hot. It was, an unfortunate thing, but Keith Willard and Tommy Harper had all the boys set out to take care of me. They put me out.
What's going on there, Coach?
I'm finding my character.
The inner driver?
Yes.
What are you doing today?
Playing Happy Hogan. At the time, it seemed like a good idea. Let's try to make my hair look like how it looks in the comics. This is it. This is what you get.
It's not too dissimilar to your regular haircut.
Is it not?
Just straight instead of
we're
curly.
gonna put a little product in here and straighten it out. It's a little thicker.
It's more of a cameo in this film. I wanted to sort of give myself a way to be in the film. As a director of a big movie, there isn't really a lot of latitude to do much of a performance, but I was able to sort of weave my way in and out of scenes. He's an ex-boxer who's Tony Stark's driver / confidant bodyguard, kind of a sidekick of sorts, although he's not a superhero in any way. And he doesn't crack a smile, and so he ironically is given the name Happy. And it's more for the comic book fans to see that, we're sort of trying, in a way to incorporate as much of the source material as we could, being that this is the first Marvel movie made for Marvel fans.
So here it is. This is it. This is Happy Hogan. I hope the fans like it. You like it, Pete?
It's great. I really do.
The real reason I'm doing this, I just broke it to Gwyneth that I marry her.
Edwards Air Force Base is here about 70 miles northeast of Los Angeles, and John wanted to include Edwards Air Force Base in the story specifically just because it has such a proud heritage of flight tests. They really wanted to tie that into sort of the research and development aspects of Stark Enterprises. So we did a lot of filming there. We shot there for 3 days. We shot on a C-17 cargo plane. We brought in an F-22 and a Global Hawk as set dressing. And we used about 300 airmen and actually Marines as well as extras.
So you've got first look, one shot, one kill. We're at the merge even before they know we're there.
Terrence Howard, we opted in this film to make him an Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. Although he was a member of the military, in the comic books he wasn't somebody of that stature. But he was somebody that bonded pretty early with Tony Stark. As a matter of fact, he was involved with his rescue from what I remember. We tried to incorporate that into the film in a way as sort of an homage to the books, but we really wanted to flesh out the character even more. And Rhodey becomes War Machine if you follow the course of the books. And as we sort of look forward to see this as a chapter in a series of films, if we could be so lucky, I think that following Terrence Howard as he becomes a superhero in his own right is something that I'm really curious and interested in.
That lovely lady you woke up with, what was his name? I think it was Ivan.
No, it was your sister.
Right.
Come on, give us a few seconds, you guys.
Pleasure to meet y'all.
Soon after that shoot, those guys cycled over to Afghanistan. So no joke, those are really tough guys, and they get a real tough job to do. And it was really nice to see Terrence and John and Robert interact with them and just be really just humbled by what a tough job those guys got and what real pros they are.
It's nice seeing you.
One of those?
Yeah. One more? Okay,
of course you can.
One more, guys. Going again right away?
The workshop was always the most important set for me. It was the space that was going to tell you before he got captured and builds the Mark I suit that he's a guy who likes fabricating, he likes working with his hands. We have him working on a 32 Ford that we show in a picture that he's working with his dad on. And it just shows that he's a bit of a gearhead. He's a guy who, not only is he a genius as far as design goes, but he actually has a hands-on knowledge of how to build things. And he's an inventor, but the type of inventor who doesn't just work with a pencil. That was important to make that leap so that it didn't just jump into fantasy land when he was in a cave and builds this suit. That he makes a breakthrough that was inevitable because he has a mind that is capable of these kind of realizations. So we put together a shop that would be any car builder's dream. We have everything from old English wheels that look like they were passed down from generation to generation. Maybe they were his dad's that were passed down. And then you also have like CNC machines that are sort of state-of-the-art, you know, or plasma cutters. And everything we figured was tied in and automated to the brain of the house. So I wanted to create a real mix of high-tech and low-tech.
Why are you hustling me out here? Where are you going? You have plans?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do.
You don't like me? What? I don't like you. I don't like it when you have plans.
Well, I'm allowed to have plans on my birthday, so there you go.
Is it your birthday?
It is.
Again?
Isn't that funny? Same day as last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you.
Pull up the neck.
You're probably feeling coolness. Unless it.
I was definitely not a comic book reader, but my brother was, so
Here we go. Pictures up.
I grew up with Marvel comics around the house, and my brother had Spider-Man underoos and Spider-Man sheets and Spider-Man everything from a very young age, and he was definitely into comic books, so I was exposed to it, although, you know, I'm a girl, let's face it, so.
You feel it? You feel the wine?
Oh,
Okay.
pus!
Okay, don't worry about it's not pus, it's an organic plasmic discharge from the device. It's not from my body.
Oh, it smells.
It's basically making a very tall upside down U.
I'm a huge military channel and Sergeant Rock. I mean, so superheroes are great. Superheroes who manufacture weapons and then build one that they wear and use, to me, is just a complete nerdgasm.
Now we're ready. I think the band's ready to go on. So without further ado, I present Robert Downey Jr. and the Boot Brigade. In an origin story of a superhero, you have certain responsibilities, one of which is, showing how the hero came to be. And it takes a lot out of a movie to have that kind of burden. But what it gives you is the opportunity to allow the audience to sort of become the hero with the hero. And I have the most fun as a viewer when I see the learning curve of a hero. There's a tendency to want to just go right for the fighting and right for the action. But I know my favorite part of the first Spider-Man film was watching him come to terms with his powers, learn how to swing from his webs. And I referred back to a lot as we met and went to pre-production meetings talking about what the set pieces would be.
I thought you said you were done making weapons.
It is. This is a flight stabilizer. It's completely harmless.
2, 1, go!
Well, watch where you point your flight stabilizer.
It's really dangerous. I like the guy that he's probably just as likely to kill himself trying to save people as he is to do the right thing.
2, 1.
As far as Robert Downey doing stunts, he wants to keep doing more and more, and I got to keep reining him back because he's very game to just keep right on going.
Following him while he's going. So when he hits the wall and falls down, there could be like a beat of no movement, and it's just punctuated by the blast. Because it's a timing thing, so.
I like to think that I can do a ton of stuff, and I'm pretty game and physically able, and probably should be for the next, like I said, 5 to 7 years. So, but then I'll talk to Tommy, and he'll be like, yeah, we're not gonna have you do that. I could do that. He goes, no, I couldn't. Well, maybe you could, but I wouldn't let you.
It still hurts, but it hurts every day. Getting up looking like this. It hurts in here, emotionally. But I'm doing better. I'm doing better. Can I go now?
Okay. Thank you.
We're about to do Tony Stark experimenting with the combination of boots and gauntlets. This is his first successful flight in his workshop. Robert here has done a lot of training on this wire rig, and the tests we've done were pretty successful.
Ready, and action.
You're off right here. Frame up on me. Good. Day 11, test 37, configuration 2.0. For lack of a better option, dummy is still on fire. Safety, if you douse me prematurely, I swear to God, I will donate you. You'll be at a city college. All right, we're gonna start off really nice and easy. Don't talk when I'm talking. 1% capacity in 3, 2, 1. Nice.
3, 2, 1, drop.
Great. Steady.
I've done wire work both as an actor and as a director in the past. I think people have been seeing wire work for so long that whether consciously or subconsciously, they could tell where the pick points are, they could tell where the wires are attached, and even if you use, computers to paint everything out, there's something about the physics of it that is unconvincing to me. And I was very skeptical if we could use it at all or if we take the audience out of the movie. What we did was we developed a way by which the character was picked or supported by his feet. So he wasn't being suspended by his center of gravity or his hips or his back, as is usually done in these films.
Hey, sorry. Clean up later.
His feet are supporting his weight, so it actually looks like he's being supported by the blast of the repulsors in the bottom of his boots. And you can see the dynamics as he's flying through the air feels much truer to what the real physics of flying, being powered by your feet, would be.
Learning one's powers is always the most fun.
Okay.
What would happen to you or to me or to anybody putting this thing on and trying to operate it? It's like surfing. I feel pretty clumsy in the beginning. And here he's wearing an engine, pretty elaborate thing.
Yeah, I can fly. Oh, man.
Ready, and lights, and action.
Something interesting happened when we saw a black and white rendering of the Mark III. It looked kind of silver, and that started our wheels turning, and then we sort of backed into the design of the Mark II, which is sort of a chromed aircraft aluminum sheet metal looking prototype version of the Mark III. And then we started incorporating exposed rivets, and because of the wonderful finishes that they were able to create through the chroming process and nickel plating process over at Stan Winston, it really has a very unique look, and that's something different from anything you've seen in the books before. But it helped provide sort of an intermediate step between the Mark I armor and the final Mark III design.
Tommy, how much is that car?
$50,000. It's a replica of a 1967 Cobra SC.
Where's it made?
In Poland at a MiG factory. That brings a tear to my eye. If you like cars at all, that hurts.
So you just step off.
Over the course of the movie, I dropped a bit of weight. I started off, I remember when I was scouting, I was quite a bit heavier than now. My assistant, Karen, helped me out. She brought me a lot of meals. I didn't spend a lot of time at craft service or going to catering. And over the course of the film, I lost weight. I lost probably about 75 pounds, maybe more, up, give or take, depending on where I'm at now. And I wanted to lose weight because I was playing Happy Hogan in the film. And so I wanted to hit a certain weight, lose a certain amount of pounds, and I just kept going. And there were problems too, because my wardrobe would change in size over the course of the film. And even my wig size changed. It's amazing. Everything sort of changes. Your shoe size changes. I have real hair, but I wanted to have cool hair. So straight hair, I never had like a real shock of straight hair like in the comic books.
I had a wonderful time working with Peter Billingsley, who is a close friend of Favreau's, and I got him to shave his head bald, not as bald as mine. I didn't want him to upstage me. It's like, yeah.
It really is. Is yours like velvety too? Oh yeah, that's nice. We both have good heads of hair.
Peter wanted to shave his head to look a little different, age him up a little bit. When you threw a lab coat on the guy, he looked like he was 14 years old, and so shaving his head and throwing glasses on him and growing a mustache gave him a little bit more of a distinguished look.
There's an ID, probably a couple pens, watch.
In approaching this cameo, I really wanted to send a message to the other actors who I felt were really phoning in their performances that, you know, guys, let me show you a level of commitment to acting.
The camaraderie that John nurtures on a set is to ad-lib.
You don't see that all the time on movies of this size, where somebody's on wires or you're up against a green screen or you can't move too much because there's going to be a computer effect, and it can get very rigid. And it was very important to John that the film not feel rigid, that the film feel and have a flow to it and have a sense of fun to it. Always believable, but never too overwhelmingly pretentious or self-serious.
We're ironmongers. We make weapons.
It's my name on the side of the building.
And what we do keeps the world from falling into chaos. The spirit in which it was shot and the way we did it was like you might do a small independent art film in a funny sort of way. I think you're just now towards the end of the movie, I think we're just starting to kind of get up to speed and start to kind of relax and have faith in this process that the way we do it. Each time we would do one of these scenes, there would be a great sense of relief, like, man, wow, we got through that one, we pulled it out, you know, how did we do it?
This technology, it comes along once in a generation. And it's a gift.
I think of him saying either that or I can take it, and you said I said no, and I put it in front of you. Be that. If I have one, will you move it back? If I have one drink, could we move on? Yes. And he takes it. Takes a drink. Now, do we cheers before that? That'd be good. We have one drink. Okay, here.
So please, and roll sound.
And boom up. Boom up. Boom up.
Okay. Ready and action.
Honey, I hate it when we fight.
Good morning, Mr.
Judge, I'm not mad. I'm just
I said I was
indifferent.
sorry. Thanks.
I don't want to hear you.
What more
You
do you
don't
need than an
respect
apology?
yourself. I definitely know you don't respect me. John recognizes that the script is a skeleton. The comic book is a skeleton. You know, what we are creating is real life, so he allows it to grow and to improv and to become something alive and three-dimensional.
I want to be fresh. I know what I'm doing. I live for this. This is business travel. I don't got a throttle between my legs going, you know hopping
Just
from
do what you want to do. Just leave me alone.
Join me. One drink. To business.
I said no.
To the future. To the Air Force.
Will it get you to shut up?
The look of the film is something that you know, is as much a part of the franchise as the character himself. And as a director, it's one of the elements that you have a lot of control over.
Maybe she does one move and then Sarah can come in and do it.
I'm not a cinematographer. I wouldn't know how to light a scene as a cinematographer or a gaffer. I have a lot of respect for what they do. But I do understand a look that I like. And in hiring Matty Lee Batik, who I've been wanting to work with for a while, and I've been a fan of his since his much smaller films, he brings a certain style to it, a certain grittiness, and he's also able to give it a big movie look. And he understands how much a priority reality is and how the challenge for this movie was to ground it in reality, because it's such a fantastic story, such a fantastic character, that your job as a director is to make it personal.
Welcome home, Mr. Starr.
Thanks, Jarvis.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
You know, there are two ways to go. One is just to create a spectacle that people could, you know, munch popcorn and ogle at and enjoy, and that certainly is a lucrative proposition. But as a filmmaker who's going to be working on this thing for 2 years and possibly other films to come, it's important for me to have an aspect to it that I could really buy into beyond just being a trifle, you know, being just a treat for the audience. You also want to do something where you're telling a story and maybe speaking to something and going for something a little bit more. And the way Matty lights and the way that Mike Riva designs the sets, it brings reality to it.
Sir, you have 1,713 new voice messages, including 3 from the man crew.
About the time that we cast Robert Downey Jr., I was thinking about the house and trying to figure out what kind of design it should be. And even though we had decided on this kind of angular, flat, metallic, hard-edged look, the idea that Robert Downey Jr. has he comes with a certain vulnerability with him, and it may sound strange, but we redesigned the notion of the house after casting him. I thought that he would be more suitable in something that architecturally mirrored who he was, a little softer inside, a little bit more susceptible, a little more vulnerable. There was a certain vulnerability about him, so I thought round is nice, and it's more elegant, and it just seemed a little bit more womb-like.
When this project first came along, they gave me a bunch of the comic books and history of the characters and so forth, and I said, ooh, Obadiah Stane's got this wild suit, ironmonger suit, and all these different things. And I got kind of excited about that again, the kid in me.
We'll counter your moves, so wherever you move, we'll kind of go with you and take the weight of the suit itself.
You have rotation by yourself, Jeff.
Yeah, I've got it now by myself, right?
No, you can spin your way. There you go.
That's always just you.
Then when I met with John the first time, he said, oh no, you don't get to wear a suit. And I kind of went, oh. And because it was the Mandarin, was originally the band, there was going to be like 2 different bad guys. And I said, oh, okay, well, let's see, how it works out. And then the scripts were being worked on, and it came back. He says, "Oh, it looks like you wanted to wear a suit. Now you've got your suit." I said, "Oh, great."
And now, I'm gonna kill you with it. You pulled out of my targeting system. Hold still.
Fire. Set. Fire.
Good.
Clear.
I think it was the most strange for Gwyneth, who, although she had worked on a green screen show, Sky Captain, she never really worked on an effects show. And she said that was very different than this. Because in this film, she's looking at like a 10-foot tall robot that's being operated by puppeteers in front of her, and she's having explosions go off behind her, and windows being blown out, lights going crazy, and things melting down. And she was right in the heart of it, running through sets at full tilt, and with things blowing up behind her, and she'd never experienced anything like that before.
I told her it was remains of the day too when we signed her.
When I did Sky Captain, that was very surreal because there was literally nothing. There was nothing practical. There were no props and no sets. And that was just sort of like doing experimental theater or something, off Broadway, because you were just in a room with some actors. And this, I was so used to working with actors and real sets that when they said, okay, now like a big monster's coming out of the ground, then I felt like, oh my God, this is so silly. And John said, oh, don't worry, so I just thought, right, well, you just have to really go for it.
And cut. Very good. One, two, three. 1, 2, 3. Bye-bye.
The first half hour of being in the Iron Man suit is like the coolest Halloween you ever had, except you're alone in the trailer before they call you on a set or whatever, or you're getting ready and you just catch a glimpse and you go, that's right, Grandma'd be proud. And then, because it's not really, it's designed for guys to wear, but I'm not a stuntman. And most of the stuntmen aren't doing, 65 scenes in the next 3 weeks. Most of them are young enough to not have a teenager at home. It was tough, and as we went further and further along, I realized I could wear the suit all the time, but I can't wear the suit all the time and be an effective actor.
I'm sorry, did that interrupt your flow? I guess this is a draw.
In the last couple of weeks of shooting, I was like, you know what? I made it this far, I need to sleep, I want to eat pasta, I don't care if I'm puffy tomorrow, don't put me in a t-shirt, kiss my ass. I did all that stuff because then the job is you drop the saddlebags and you charge out of Dodge City, because you want to get out without getting your ass bit by a rattlesnake.
Now it's time for both of us to go. That's the law of nature, Tony! Oh!
Ladies and gentlemen, on to Las Vegas. That is a wrap. Thank you, everybody.
Here we are out in front of Caesar's Palace, the third movie I've done here. And we're exhausted. We're doing a death split, which means you start at midnight and go into the next day. We tried to turn around. Everybody stayed up as late as they could, gambling and partying last night, and tried to sleep all day. I, for one, was not able to sleep all day, and I have to act and direct today. So this could all go to hell in a handbasket on our last day of principal photography. But here we are. This is the big finish line. We always knew that if we got here, we'd be in good shape. So it's a bit of a celebration. It's going to be a fun scene. We're going to start outside, then go inside. And here he is, Tony Starks.
Tony Stark.
I was just saying, we don't need sleep. We got talent.
That's right.
Work it, work it, work it!
I'm just so proud of everybody and satisfied and the whole deal. I mean, in my psyche right now, it's that thing of like someone was saying the last day of high school and, you know, you kind of just can't wait to throw your hat up, but then you're like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I just remember last, you know, October, November, and meeting John regarding this, and then screen testing, and then pre-production. To me, like most of us were burnt by the time pre-production was done because we prepped ourselves into a tizzy. And then there's starting in the first 2 weeks in the cave, and then going to Lone Pine, and then it was Air Force Base. I mean, it's the problematic thing of looking at a schedule, or looking at what anyone looking at what their life is for the next 3 months. It's like, this can't be done.
Thank you, everybody. That is a wrap.
You know, every movie has its trials and tribulations. We did encounter a snowstorm in the middle of a desert in a cave scene, which was very odd. We did have sets that blew away and blew down, but it actually, the movie gods were with us most of the time. And while it was always daunting, it went fairly smoothly, which was great for our first production, very important for our first production.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jon Favreau, director of Iron Man!
That's a testament to John, to the crew that we put together, and for the cast, who were always game, who could always maneuver through whatever circumstances were thrown at them. And, you know, we did. We came in on time and under budget.
Okay, so
take a look at this.
Take
a look at this.
Take a look at this. I know. I want you to go to SU 132. Where's the conference room?
That's looking good. And Dan extended it?
Yes, you
loved it, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you did.
This just came in?
Oh, that's much
Yeah.
better.
It came in yesterday as a temp.
It's coming along nice. There's your little ribs moving.
All right.
Let's do that again.
Let's put up the expensive cropper.
There's those. That actually does help a lot, John. That little rib event. Yeah, we got to rack down. I want to see under the floor a little bit too, because that helps.
Well, they also added, what I like is the heels, you know, that we had on the Mark II as well. They added it here, which we didn't have in the other version, and that's very cool.
The thing I think that makes the biggest difference is they have the arm actually operating the screw.
Yeah, I think right.
And that one too. There's one on the right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
As we go up, just take it a few frames forward. That thing's coming off of there. I almost want that to linger a little bit more so we see that. It's almost happening out of
The
frame.
gantry arm?
It is happening out of frame.
Yeah,
So we should just delay that when that piece comes out. If we could delay that event. Because it closes as soon as we're on it.
Yeah, it's because there's something right at the beginning. You want something sort of in the middle to go, so you just go, yeah, the party started. But it's definitely cool. It's definitely going in the right place.
It's much better, and that actually helps a lot with those little flippies. All right, anything else to look at?
I have a feeling it's gonna be bad. What's that?
Is that where we get out? I thought it was longer. Why is it trimmed so short?
It's on the step. It's on the step.
That looks like it's very short. I felt some of what was cool about it was that
Yeah,
he walks out.
Okay.
I am in the mocap suit in this. This is a shot we were trying to get the first reveal right. He moves a little
How's
too much
that?
like Happy Hogan.
So you have it in the cut there?
Take it now.
Do you have the previous?
That's way short. So here's my question. Clearly we're going down a dead end road here because we're changing the performance on this thing. I like the camera angle, but now Dan's cutting out, and I'm assuming going downstairs. I'm not gonna tell him, hey, get me one more half a step. That breaks the shot.
Well, should we try and get Dan here for a minute and maybe at least he can tell us?
We can, but I know what he's gonna say. He's gonna say, why would I have him just go a half a step? It throws off the reveal. This is all about the reveal. So right now I'm cutting in the middle of a head turn, and the head turn's throwing off the reveal. So let's change that, and maybe that'll take some of the curse off of it. But we're now cutting even shorter the reveal, and the whole idea of this was to make it longer, which is why when we did the mocap performance, we looked at the full length of the plate
Right.
to see what we had.
Right.
And then after we did that, we found out that we couldn't get it.
Exactly.
Check it out. It's cool.
This stuff is looking freaking awesome.
It's amazing. Yeah. That's a temp too.
What?
It is a temp.
Really? Can we final it?
So can we talk about?
Should I put a mullet in there?
You guys
What
like the
happens if we final it?
texture
Does that-
of you like the texture of the gantry?
I love everything
oval?
about it.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I love the animation too, all those pieces coming in.
Okay, that's SU95, right?
SU95.
Oh, I think I buy that more. I think it's got to clap. That's got to sort of clap more close. See how it's sliding?
It's got to go.
It's got to slide in and then go kunk, kunk. Yeah. And I think there should be some sort of undergack to it too. It's just starting to imply. But I think it's gonna be good. Should there be backs to it or something so it doesn't just feel like a?
I gotcha.
Do you know what I mean?
So it should be seamed around here.
Something that should be another sort of maybe like cranial element because it just feels very 2D with it just feels very. The whole thing is it's Iron Man. It should be.
Yeah, it should be tough, strong.
Do we want to have one spin or no spin at all?
I like to spin. Well, remember we were talking about him going out upside down?
Yeah.
That's what we had talked about. Like he was sort of coming out upside down and not spinning. The spin feels a little bit like when he in the dogfight pencil, maybe.
Yeah.
So that's what we had talked about. So I feel like he's out of frame. I feel like it's a little too self-conscious of a move
Too
for
showy.
him. A little too showy.
Yeah.
He's
Okay.
right. Where am I going now? Down to
Let's go down to the mix, and then hopefully we can sit with Dan and we can look at 6 to 7 ADR.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Been up here before? No. The first time?
Yeah.
It is amazing. Have these posters. He says this one here.
Yeah. Bring that down.
This one there. There's a little tiny room. And here it is, the Kurosawa mixing stage. Let's see if he's in here. The sound.
I just want to make sure that's
I like the actual RT sound itself.
Well, no, I was only bringing you in for that.
Let's see that one more time.
The RT we haven't like mixed yet.
Good.
Yeah.
Let me see again. I think it's good. So those sound like servos, right? So the layers I'm expecting that we'll get to now are going to be the winding up of the RT.
Right,
Also.
and also movement, presence and sort of servo / plasma sort of type of sound for him moving around
Good.
as well.
And because this is like when we're seeing the RTs being used against people too, it's the first time we're really showing it.
Right.
We might want to sweeten it with like, on top of the sound we have, we should have something in our pocket like a thunder crack or something to sort of bury in there, kind of like we did with the pig squeal and stuff.
Right, yeah.
Just to give it a little more pop if it's not, because it has to be a little more overwhelming than it is later.
Right, right.
It has to have its own like signature, holy shit, this guy, it's like the first time Dirty Harry fires the Magnum.
Right, right.
It's gotta really be a special one. And don't worry about consistency, worry about impact.
Jon Favreau called for Iron Man and said, "Can you help us?" It's Iron Man. Are you kidding me? I mean, of course I want to work on Iron Man. I mean, of course we want to do that. I mean, I love Marvel comics. I love Spider-Man. I used to read Iron Man. John Nelson called and said, you know, can you guys come in and look at some of these interfaces? There's a lot of text you can't quite read, and it's very technical, but it wasn't advancing the story. But this is the kind of thing, different ideas for how those interfaces look. You know, John always used the reference of, you know, the iPhone kind of thing, the sort of simplicity. He felt like Tony Stark would be really visually sophisticated and not just like a technological nerd, but he would have a real sense of style, and all the products in his house would have a real sense of this high design sensibility.
Connect to the Cisco, have it reconfigure the shell metals, use the gold titanium alloy from the Seraphim tactical satellite. That should ensure fuselage integrity while maintaining power to weight ratio. Got it?
Yes. Shall I render using proposed specifications?
Thrill me.
So we want to show that the computer is processing something specific to that, whereas the interfaces prior, some of them, just looked complicated, but they didn't look specific to the story. And John was very specific about, you know, you have to hit this story point, even though it's a pan from one monitor to another, and you only have, you know, 3 seconds. I still want to get what's going on with those monitors. The beginning designs on the hologram. That's that. But then they let us work on the main title, and we came up with a ton of stuff. We had the idea of the title itself kind of forming like...
As a company our size, we always like to put our best foot forward and get as much out there as we can, make a really good impression on the pitch. So, you know, we pitched a lot of different styles and a huge range of things, from, you know, the shiny, glossy kind of look to something kind of gritty and textural. When I'm involved in an effort of that scale, I always like to just do something completely different, knowing that those stand a great chance, but maybe there's, you know, an opportunity for something else.
I had a board that had flying. The interface, he says, "I am Iron Man," and then the HUD display encases him, and it comes up around him, and then he takes off. The kind of brief that I gave the people here is that I thought when he says, "I'm Iron Man," it should be like a celebratory thing, like you leave the theater and you're pumped. And I also thought about, I liked the interaction of the robots, and so we had a board that was all about type, that was kind of being, you know, very complex kind of situation with type being made by robots. And John felt like there wasn't a lot of detail material of the suit itself, so he very much responded to a board that was all about the inner mechanics of the suit. But we had this little motion test, and John saw it and he really liked it.
And this is what we had showed to them the first meeting. I decided, well, you know, maybe it would be kind of interesting to do something that's like a video game, kind of wireframe sort of looking. And Tempest, it was fully Tempest. The color, the look of it. It was that and a combination of Tron. I liked Tron a lot at the time too, and a game called Battlezone. So I was a real, I would go into arcades all the time as a kid to spend like $40 and, you know, in quarters at a time on these things. And that was a lot then, you know, to do. I'm kind of dating myself.
John saw it and he really liked it, and I think he wanted to move away from the kind of language of Spider-Man and have something that was more kind of funky, and now Kevin was a little bit more, you know, he was wondering if it became a conversation then about what's the level of rendering. Well, it looks retro, and John's like, no, that retro is, that's what's cool. That's what's cool about it.
In talking to the director, at that point, we were going back and forth so much, you know, between what can it be. We went a little bit too far, I think, in the sort of printed kind of look, and it ended up looking like paper in a way, so we were kind of unhappy with that. Fortunately, after showing them that, they didn't like that very much. We went right back to it. What was super cool for us was that ILM had given us this, they gave us the CG model for Iron Man. So you can imagine the detail in that. I mean, we're peeling apart layer after layer. It was just endless. I think these guys had spent months at this thing. But it was so fun to be able to just take that plate, you remove it, there's this mesh, you know, you remove that. There's all these like little screws and bolts and nuts and all of that, which is really evident in this shot here. It's crazy what these guys did. They just, you know, it's like real machine work. They just went and did every single piece. The detail these guys put in, it's just such a labor of love from them. They really, really figured this thing out. You know, like we wanted a little bit of a hint of film here, you know, and then we just kind of give it a lot of nice grain and texture and all that kind of stuff. That Ilya had come up with this look, you know, to give it a little bit of an imperfect quality. And they wanted us to put War Machine in there, so we found a good opportunity to do that, I think, on this here. Dave Reiner had modeled this. So all of this was made here at Prologue. We had a couple reference photos to go off of to be able to do that. And then here, I like even like laser tag, you know how they have all the black light kind of thing. My kids play that. They love that stuff, but I think it's not as popular anymore, but I thought it might be kind of fun to explore that just a little bit right here.
So here we are. You guys are working extremely hard, I know, but I think...
Get a close-up of this part.
Working extremely hard, but one of the things that we do need to do is kind of formulate how we're going to finish now, and how what is our task at hand to get this movie so that we can clearly have prints by the end of March.
The one relentless thing, calendar-wise, is VisFX. That's the thing that once we run out of time, we're done.
Right.
And so I want to make sure that they're not waiting, because oftentimes they have people hot bunking and working around the clock at these vendors, and if I don't get in there when they need me,
absolutely,
there are people waiting, and at a certain point the bell's going to ring and we're not going to get those shots in, and that's honestly the most concerning part of the process to me right now.
As of today, we have 162 outstanding shots, out of which 22 were always the Gomera ones for March.
Right.
21st. So outstanding is 140.
The caveat, though, really ultimately is going to be Iron Man's voice, because no one's ever seen it actually as something that really works yet.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those things, it's just like your VFX, until they work, they don't work, and it's like...
and it could mean pulling out a lot of lines or adding lines and stuff like that.
Yeah, the character of the film just is radically altered, so that's the one shared discovery that he'll have a lot to say about.
Is it the same for Monger too, or no?
Probably. It is.
Because he hasn't heard Reel 4 yet, where you're actually...
And maybe even Jarvis.
Yeah, it doesn't really start till Reel 5, because we don't use Iron Man voice in First Flight.
Now the space battle stuff, because it's such an important story point, and because there's so many moving parts between ADR, performance, robot voices, the effects themselves, the music, all the things are going to sort of come together and have to pay off in a way that I'm not completely confident in. A big thing that we're going to have to dial and understand as we see the shape of it in the cut and as all the finals lay in is the degree of ice that's on him. And that's going to be all Ben over there, and that's going to be something where I think we're going to be
really dialing in and out more than we have with most of the shots we've been working with them.
Once again, to be honest with you, Charlie, I just honestly think we're not gonna, we'll need to go through that weekend, and I think just to get this thing mixed, just to get up to the playback on the 17th. I'm just.
So you want to be mixing all the way through to the 17th.
Well,
I'm just
being real with this pace, you know, of what we're trying to do and what's all going on here.
Now I told him no soul patch on Rhodey in his Air Force one, but that one I think was already done.
No, these are awesome.
So
how do we get them?
They'll be toys. You'll be able to purchase them. Yeah, or I mean I can send them to you, but they'll be like in the toy store.
What are you talking about, Jeremy?
Come on, you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Look at that one. The Mark I's awesome.
It's pretty great. Very cool.
That's the best monger.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
He's sick. That's the best toy yet.
How do you feel about that, Manny?
Yeah, that's better.
Just generally, I
think
guess.
it'll. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. It's not really worth chasing, really.
Okay. Well, it's just this one shot.
Yeah. Can we see just, what is it
Okay,
about the color
we'll
that
do
seems
that.
a little, see the blue on the left there? Maybe we can use that as a guide to try to swing it more
Okay.
away from that.
All right.
It's hard to really read it on the glass.
This is also, but you see how I'm swinging it away from the red and the skin?
Yeah,
tone?
no, that's fantastic.
Okay, great.
That's kind of where I wanted to go.
Let's try.
It's a very interesting time now, and I remember this on other movies, and boy, you don't know what's going to happen. This could be anything from a flop to a moderate single, you know, where you get on base and just keep plugging along in your career, to something that, you know, where it's beyond what people's expectations are. I honestly don't know. I'm sort of the worst person to handicap that kind of thing right now. I'm in the worst seat in the house. I'm right in the thick of things. I don't know where we are.
Can you click it up maybe a hair?
Yeah.
Right now, I'm worried about the minutia. Right now, there's still shots from ILM we're waiting to get back. I don't know if that space battle is going to pay off. You know, I'm still in the sound mix, the DI. We're still making picture changes. That's just the nature of things. You know, this non-linear style of post-production. It used to be you would lock a movie, you do the music, and then you'd sit back and mix at this point. Well, we're still making picture changes. Ramin's still composing score cues for us if it doesn't quite fit. We're dancing as fast as we can. And then I'm going to be promoting the thing all around the world.
I don't mind it though. Hey, I think if it was just up, it would be less saturated back there.
Looks like a Star Wars poster.
This is a bit of a fever pitch. We're getting all the shots in. We're trying to finish them up. All the work of 2 years is all paying off now. We've showed it to some people. We've shown like an unfinished version to like Paramount foreign distributors. They laugh. They like it. We've shown scenes at Comic-Con, WonderCon. They all like it. I've shown friends. But this is a Marvel movie. We don't test these movies. So I don't know. They don't want it getting out on the internet. It's a very secret process. So I really don't know how people are going to react to this thing. I know the people close to me seem to like it. I know that there's funny scenes, that there's scenes with a lot of heart. There's a lot of truth in it. I love the performances. I love the cast. I think the suit worked out really well. I think ILM did a spectacular job. The score sounds good to me, and certainly the sound effects sound great. So I don't know.
Okay, so this is the all ADR cut that's loaded.
Send them to the versions.
Right. All right. See what we got here.
How do you think the Mark I chess piece is going to hold up?
The suit's at 48% power and falling, sir. That chess piece was never designed for sustained flight.
Keep it posted.
I've located this pass.
Pepper.
Tony! Tony, are you okay?
I'm fine. Listen.
Obadiah, he's gone insane.
I know. Listen, you better get out of there.
What am I looking at now? And he's
Get out there right now. Understand?
Where do you think you're going? Your services are no longer required. What a waste.
That what a waste sounds. Is a f***ing waste.
Well, all those three lines, are they complementary is the big question.
I don't think so.
Well, they've got a...
Yeah. Assuming we could get it to
Make them
sound the
sound
same.
Your services.
Okay, because you
The
have...
whole thing about him pointing the gun, a line over pointing the gun explains why he's not smoking her, right? That's the whole thing.
That's the idea. Yeah.
So your services are no longer required. I would push over that. I know we had it there once before. I would say I would get what a waste out of there.
Okay.
And I would just
Should I duplicate your thing down here?
Sure.
Okay, where are you working? ADR work bin?
Yeah.
Okay. So right here. He hates when directors point at the screen during photo ops. I do it all the time now.
Where do you think you're going? Your services are no longer required.
Okay, so we're talking about moving right here and getting rid of what a waste. Okay.
Yes.
There's like
Right
mixed
there.
downs because that stuff is
And
so
then
low.
I'm gonna.
Oh, you're using mixed downs?
Yes. So we'll just write.
They'll be just in the dialogue tracks too.
That's even worse.
There's
If a director snaps, he loses his fingers.
These are the cuts. This is how they know it cut. You have the rhythm of the cut.
There's just, it'll just be like.
Your services are no longer required.
The only thing I think we could put in is a Pepper Potts before your services are no longer required to bridge that cut. Pepper Potts. You could tell me that this thing barely made its money back in its theatrical release, I would believe you, or that it blew up, and I would believe that too. I know there's a lot of big movies coming out this summer, and they look good. As the head of Sony Distribution told me last time around, he says there's only so many seats in the bus, you know, and you know, you got about 3 or 4 movies get to be a hit in either a holiday season or a summer season, and you're either in it or you're not.
Pepper Potts.
Pepper Potts.
Pepper Potts. Your services are no longer required.
Pepper Potts.
Come on, Jeremy, you said that was a good one.
Pepper Potts. That was the studio select.
That was the one that came with the line, Pepper Potts, I have the feeling you're trying to avoid me. So beautiful, what a waste.
I know that I'm proud of it. I know that we've done everything we can. I know that we're hitting some sort of note because we're getting feedback. After Comic-Con, we showed the footage, people got on board and got excited about it. And now it's being spoken of in the same breath as like Batman and Indiana Jones. I mean, we weren't part of that conversation when we started off. We were like an unknown quantity. It built from like a small little grassroots thing into something where people are anticipating it. So I know the awareness is there, which is something I didn't have on Zathura, the last film I worked on. So it feels different than that.
As our first film out of the gate, I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be more proud of the film that we've put together, of the team that we've put together, of the cast that we've put together, and of John. It feels very, very good to have this kind of buzz on a character that outside of the hardcore Marvel fans, most people didn't know a year ago. Most people go, well, oh, was he the guy in the medal and the suit and with the goatee? Maybe people knew. And now the name Tony Stark is as famous as the name Iron Man. It feels exciting. It feels like people are ready to go out there and start the summer off with our film, which is going to deliver.
With the first one out, people seem to be, you know, ready for the thing. Let's see if that internet buzz translates to a larger buzz and an anticipation with the general audience. But I do feel confident going in, and I get the suspicion that I'll be doing more of these, and you know, it could potentially change the, you know, the nature of my whole life and my whole career.
Kind of have this moment.
I'm in great company, and I've never had it so good.
Is it cool to be directing a movie, like a comic book movie?
It's awesome, man. I grew up reading this thing, and now here I'm making this movie.
E-Mark.
And action.
Hey, Tony.
Hey.
Remember me?
Hey, how's it going, Hef?
This gentleman was born to play Tony Stark, and the way he looks is exactly the way I pictured him. We are so lucky to have Robert Downey Jr. playing this role. I was born under a lucky star, I gotta tell you. And to be in a scene with him, brief as it was, and I'll talk to them about that later, it was a joy, really a joy.
Thank you.
On the contrary, thank you.
Robert, any thoughts about meeting the creator of this character?
Well, we got to hang out a little bit before we started shooting, and I picked your brain quite a bit. It helped a lot going into rehearsals and all that, and we it's just such a great character and story you created, and I'm just eternally grateful.
I'm grateful that you're playing it, and I want to tell you that I'm glad I was able to give you the various acting tips that I did.
You did.
And if you just kind of remember what I told you, just read the lines, don't trip over the furniture, and at any time just say to yourself, Howard Stan save us, and you'll be and I'm no further than your phone. You run into problems, I'm always there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want them in all my sequels. Yes. My cameo tonight, obviously they felt there had to be one guarantee that they would do very well with the audiences. So naturally, they decided any scene with Bob and me had to be a sure, crowd pleaser.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a camera wrap on the creator of Iron Man, Mr. Stan Lee.
Mr. Stark, you have been described by some as a Da Vinci for our time. What do you have to say about that?
Da Vinci, ridiculous. I don't paint.
Oh, and what do you have to say about the fact that Stark Weapons is responsible for millions of deaths since World War II?
Oh boy, let me guess. Berkeley, Ms.
Miss Summer, and it's Brown.
Okay. Well, listen, Ms. Brown. It's an imperfect world, but it's the only one we've got. I assure you the day weapons are no longer needed to keep the peace all happily transist to manufacturing bricks and beams for baby hospitals, making hemp pants and the like, but until that time, can I get you a drink?
You rehearse that much?
Yeah, every night in front of the mirror before bed. Why, is it stale?
Well, I can picture that.
I could show you firsthand.
Sorry, I don't laugh at your jokes. I haven't been paid to like all the DoD fat cats in this place, Mr.
It's all
Stark.
right, stick around, you'll be on payroll soon enough. Call me Tony.
I'm sorry, Tony. I was looking for a more serious answer.
Okay, you're serious. My old man had a philosophy. Peace by definition means having a bigger stick than the other guy, so I feed the good dog. We arm the good guys because you can be sure as shit someone's arming the bad guys.
Nice justification coming from the guy selling the sticks.
You mean my father? My father, who was commended by FDR for working on the Manhattan Project, who helped defeat the Nazis?
Well, others call it war profiteering.
This is a rhetorical question, no need for a response. Tell me, do you plan to run any pictures of all the millions that we've saved by advancing medical technology or kept from starvation with our telecrops? Or are you going to ignore all those advances that were spawned from military funding?
Wow. Wow, you really have all of this down. You ever lose an hour of sleep your whole life?
I gotta tell you, is that thing wrong? You're never gonna get me in the sack with that attitude. Crudité? Okay. Done. Done. You're still Buckingham Palace. What do we got? What, I gotta break out the psyops? There it is. There's a smile. It's okay. Yeah, so it's natural. Less muscles to smile. Seriously. I gotta hand it to you guys. Every single one of you deserves a medal. I shit you not.
Thank you, Mr. Stark.
Please call me Tony. I mean, seriously, here you are. You're sweating balls in the desert. You're fighting for our freedom back home. And it's ghastly. The conditions. There's not a woman in sight.
I'm a woman.
Yes. Clearly. Although I retract that statement. I'd like to admit that. God, so I wouldn't kid you. Back home, I got them in rotation, like pitchers. What do you got? What do you got? What's getting you through the cold nights, huh? Don't ask, don't tell.
Jimmy met a goat.
He did.
At least it's a girl, okay?
You know what? That's jealousy. Can you smell that? At least you're a one-goat man. It's hard to come by. All kidding aside. There's a lot of us doing well back home. We owe a tremendous amount to your sacrifice. I know I'm just a schmuck in the suit who's going to take off in a helicopter in 20 minutes, but there's not much I can do for you, but I'm going to show you a good time. That's something I'm highly decorated for.
Good enough.
I got something special planned for you boys, girls, back at the base.
Great.
But there's one condition. You ready? Will you comply, soldier? Sure. Jimmy, you get first dibs on the petting zoo. You like that? Sometimes they don't hit. That's all. I'm out here, I'm shooting. In my own special way.
And action.
So who else knows about this?
Nobody. Well, as always, there's a chance Pepper might know. I would probably think, yeah, Pepper knows everything.
Yeah, well, this is quite a feat of engineering.
It should be. Real breakthrough is the power supply. Rest just kind of built itself.
I tell you, if you made a couple of these for the military, I can probably make all those problems go away.
Now, Dice, you know if I hand this over 5 years, we'll be fighting against these things.
I disobeyed a direct order.
Oh, is that what I did?
A direct order to keep them from blowing you out of the sky. Next time I may not have that same result.
Maybe next time you scramble F-22s against me, I just might not play defense.
Are you threatening me?
Weapons that I built are being used to kill innocent people. Can't let that happen. It's my problem. I'm gonna take care of it.
God damn it, if you start invading sovereign airspace and waging a personal war, it is my problem.
How about the fact that this whole country's about to have a big problem and no one seems to give a shit?
It's complicated.
Is it? Not for me. I can make a choice. I can fight for what's right. Tell me, Rhodey, if you were me, would you sit on the sidelines? Could you live with yourself if you did? I know you. Yeah, that's right. You'd do something about it, too.
It's not up to us to decide.
You heard that, right? That's where you're wrong. I'm gonna get back to work. See yourself out. You remember the door, right?
Got it.
Now, you're like, not now. You know what I mean? It's like that. It's one of those things where you're in the, right there or some way, or you have your thing up together, you're like, we're fine, or whatever. You know what I mean? Where it just gets for a second, and then I don't know if we're on the ground.
He's like the boxer who won't fight. You're like the boxer who wants to fight at the press conference. He's like the boxer who says, "Stay for the ring."
But when you come in, he just like pinches your side and punches you as you go away. And go, this is crazy.
Right? He's a patient man, though. Right. You're the impetuous one. He's the one who's waited 30 years for this.
I know that impulse thing, but I'm just wondering if it's letting the steam out too early, or like, you know, the natural thing, when we were in that close proximity, if you went at me, my knee is right there by your balls, but that seems almost, when everybody gets hit in the balls, it's kind of a comedic, there's a little comedic thing, which I'm not sure we want to do.
No,
you know?
it's
But
here, it's
here,
there.
it's here.
What's the photo op, though? You're smart. What's the photo op?
You know what to me it is? I love that the photo op is at the end of it. I would love it if at this scene, we stand up and he goes, we're fine, or he's hit me, or I had him on the ground, and I said, you're fine. Or we stand up and he comes in and he goes, no, we're okay. And now they're all lined up, they're all right there. And he goes, come here. And we just stand there and take a picture together, and while we're doing it, I say, and when you're done, I just walk away. Like, that's not bad.
I don't know why he loses it, though, just because you're grabbing his neck.
Well, I don't know. I think it's that he's defending him.
It's
I think
scarier if
whether
he could slap you
he
and
could
then back off.
You know, that'd be great. Dude, if you slap me and back off.
No, but like
or if I get you, and I
like a child.
Yeah, like a whap. And then backs up. And then the guys grab me, and then you stop.
That's the worst thing you could do to somebody, I think, because you're not really trying to kill him. If you smack him in the face in front of everybody, it's like that's.
Well, what's great is the restraint to stand back and watch it.
Yeah.
The sort of the restraint, something's going on, but it's not.
Like his child, like you're dressing a child down. That's why I kind of like that, as opposed to both of you. Like you get his. If you
But
get
it still
his anger
has
up,
to seem like these guys are not going to be at odds at the end.
It's just so funny that he's so passionate. Boy, this guy, like everybody, he pushes and pushes them, and they all band together for him. I don't think we hide anything from now on. We don't know that he's in the suit at the end, but we know you guys aren't. When he said the injunction happened, you can't get that ground back. It's done. Okay. It's a done deal. Run through it again. All right, let's think about it. So now that we're filming, it can actually be good. The beats are that. You come over,
Downey. Do you know who? Tony, listen to me. Do you know who you're messing with? These people. We're talking about the United States military, $1 billion interests, the world order. Do you think I can protect you against these people?
I can ask you something. Do you think Pepper is actually attractive? She's been working with me for 7 years. I had no idea, but now they're here. Now he's actually pretty good. Of course I know who I'm messing with. These are the same people who are trying to block me out of the company. I trust the press more than I trust anybody around me except you right now. But when I'm a child, Tony, you're not a kid. You know I hate it when
you have about as much control over the situation as a child who's sitting next to his father in a car with a plastic steering wheel, trying to turn the car the way Daddy drives it.
Then let me out of the car.
Tony, you're out of the car. Who do you think made the injunction on you, Tony?
Well, it was a funny thing. I think I gave myself a dare. It was the height of the Cold War. The readers, the young readers, if there was one thing they hated, it was war, it was the military, or as Eisenhower called it, the military-industrial complex. So I got a hero who represented that to 100th degree. He was a weapons manufacturer. He was providing weapons for the army. He was rich. He was an industrialist. But he was a good-looking guy, and he was courageous. He went over to Vietnam by himself to test out one of the weapons, and then something happened, and that's how he became Iron Man. But I thought it would be fun to take the kind of character that nobody would like, none of our readers would like, and shove them down their throat and make them like them. And because of the fact that Tony Stark was such a great guy, see, I kind of had Howard Hughes in mind when I was thinking of Tony. He was without being crazy, he was Howard Hughes. And he became very popular. I'll tell you a funny thing about Tony, who, as you know, had his heart had been injured, and he was always afraid at any moment he could keel over. I loved the concept of a guy in the armored suit and with all the things he could do. And I loved the idea we came up with that Iron Man was really somebody who was Tony Stark's bodyguard, because he had to justify, what's this guy doing, always hanging around? And I thought that was kind of clever. So there was Tony Stark, there was Iron Man occasionally, and he's Tony's bodyguard, that's okay. I loved the name Pepper Potts and Happy Hogan. Here's this rich man, he has this beautiful assistant or secretary, and she's in love with him. Now, if I were really an original writer, I would have had her hate him, but what the heck. Of all the comic books we published at Marvel, we got more fan mail for Iron Man from women, from females, than any other title. For some reason, females really loved Iron Man. And I figured out it was because, first of all, he was handsome. Secondly, he was rich. And thirdly, I think a girl would want to mother him and say, that's all right, you'll be okay. Don't worry about your heart. I'll look after you. And hey, if you die, I inherit all your money. No, I only added that. I didn't mean that. But I think there was something about Tony that aroused the maternal instinct in women or something. But whatever the reason, and I never got over that. We got more fan mail for Iron Man from girls. We didn't get much fan mail from girls. But whenever we did, it was usually, the letter was usually addressed to Iron Man.
The beauty part for me about Iron Man has always been, and here you have this character who on the outside is invulnerable. I mean, just can't be touched. But inside is a wounded figure. Stan made it very much an in-your-face wound. You know, his heart was broken, you know, literally broken. But there's a metaphor going on there. And that's I think, what made that character interesting.
It was very easy for me to deal with the armor because I didn't have to draw it. I felt sorry for the artist. I'd make up anything, add this to the armor, do that to the armor, do that. Then I'd go do something else, and the poor guy had to work on it. And I was never satisfied with Iron Man's armor. If you look through all the issues of Iron Man, you will see I must have had his armor changed 1,000 times.
I loved Iron Man. There wasn't too much asked of me drawing him because there was hardly a face there. There's just not even a nose, just a slight hint of a nose, and a mouth and eyes, where you never even saw the pupils of the eyes. And I loved it because it was a challenge to get to show emotion on his face, because he's wearing a metal helmet. The suit is all metal, so I would bend the rules a little bit by showing if he was smiling at something, just to tweak the mouth up just enough to convey the message to the readers that he's smiling, or anger. And then I would do this, you know, and then you'd see these lines in here. And that would tell them that he was angry. The first cover was in pencil and about the size of a comic book cover. And it sold right away. And so I figured, since it's the first cover and it was so popular, they even made a print of it, the company. I decided to recreate it myself. And so I did. And that's how that came into being. That's, of course, much bigger than the cover, and more interesting in the sense that it's big, it's in color. And that's how I did it. I just copied everything that I had in front of me, all the detail, all the little back figures, and the lettering. I did the best I could with it, and it turned out good. Well, it's dynamic, really dynamic, and it moves. That figure moves, and he takes up a good deal of the cover. And of course, the lettering is big. It's like a burst. He's coming out of an explosion of some sort. And these little figures are just trimmings that you can hardly see unless you get up close. It was a joy doing it because it was a smooth thing to do.
As a kid, I really liked that character precisely because I could imagine myself in that suit. So that was fun. When I came onto the Iron Man book, it had been kind of, I won't say floundering, but it sort of lost its way for a few years up to that point. It had been a kind of a stepchild for the Marvel Universe, but it had always still maintained a certain cachet. It was also very heavily influenced by pop culture, and you know, there was a lot of characters go around saying they were heavy. That's heavy, man. Heavy. Can you dig it? These days it would be, what's up, you know? Here's a guy who's basically a warmonger, a merchant of death. Now, when the character was created, that was not inherently a bad thing. You know, we're talking about in the early 60s, before Vietnam became a disaster, the idea of, you know, an arms merchant was not by itself a bad thing. But as time goes on and the war begins to become, you know, an issue and something that we as writers cannot ignore, here you have this character who represents the worst aspects of the, you know, the military-industrial complex. Now, what are you going to do with that? You know, you can do You can take it in many different directions, but one direction that you might want to take it, if you're trying to make a hero, is to give him an inner conflict over the fact that he has this place in the world. Well, there are only a handful of villains that stand out, you know, in the Iron Man Crimson Dynamo, and the Mandarin, you know, being like the main two. And both of them sort of iconic Cold War figures, you know. The Red Star, I think, was another one. Black Widow, you know, was, I think, introduced in Iron Man. So there was this kind of Cold War demonology going on. You know, all the foreigners were bad and all the Americans were good. Well, of all of them, I think the Mandarin, you know, spoke to me the most because he was sort of like the anti-Stark. Tony is, as the richest person in the Marvel universe, you can almost imagine him as sort of like the linchpin, you know, that draws everybody else together. It was his mansion where the Avengers started the Avengers. I mean, he's the guy who started the Avengers, in effect, by providing them a place to stay. You know, here you are.
The Avengers, very early on, or reasonably early on, particularly when it came to Cap and Thor, these guys learned who was behind the masks or helmets. And that kind of gave Tony a circle of peers, a circle of people that he could relate to on his own level, not necessarily intellectually or scientifically.
S.H.I.E.L.D., I always felt that that S.H.I.E.L.D. was a Tony Stark creation in some sense, that he's the guy who put it together, you know, or made it possible. He certainly must have designed the helicarrier, you know, and probably sold it to them, you know, and Stark Industries was the primary supplier of weapon technology to the American government, you know, for many years.
Tony's involvement in S.H.I.E.L.D. goes right back to the beginning. You read the very first Nick Fury story, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. story, and Tony's there. Tony's already part of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's designed all of their tech and stuff and all their advanced weapons. And all through the really early issues of S.H.I.E.L.D., he kept coming back into the strip, just as Tony Stark, inventor. And every once in a while, they drop maybe a little allusion to Iron Man. But if you weren't reading Iron Man, he was just a guy in Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
George Tuska is one of the unsung heroes. Because his work was cartoony, in a sense, at a time when realistic art was in demand in comics, people didn't take his work as seriously as they probably ought to. He could break a story down as well as any of the best comic book storytellers. And he also drew a very dynamic Iron Man. You know, there was a weight and a solidity to his version of Iron Man that I really liked.
It was the first monthly title that I ever did. And that happened in I think 77. I think somebody just up and left the company. I was nervous, and it was because my father was working up the office, and it was a monthly title, and I hadn't considered ever doing Iron Man when I was up as a young artist. I thought about Spider-Man and that type of character, Daredevil. Never thought about doing Iron Man. And it was a different type of a character to me, because I always had that problem with the logistics, the armor. Oh my God, it's flexible armor. I had this close-minded, that's impossible. It's got to be hinges somewhere, joints. It didn't make sense. And you suspend belief for the character, and then I began to really enjoy it. And then it blossomed into more than what it was, because it became a melodrama as well as a great visual. And then, of course, he had his personal problems, the demons, and it became more than the simplistic armor to save the heart type of character. Okay, this is the very first complete comic I ever did. And I've been told over the last 30 years that it is the #1 book to line bird cages with, because of this great spot right here, right above, right below the little perch, right there. Getting the first one done was probably as good a feeling as I've ever had in anything, because it's like climbing your first mountain, hitting your first home run.
I was very young, just right out of high school, basically. Probably the youngest guy in the history of Marvel at the time. I mean, there have been younger guys since then. I think I was 19. So getting your foot in the door as a young guy was almost impossible. I mean, Barry Smith had to break down a ton of barriers. He's Barry frickin' Smith, One of them greatest artists in the history of comics, in my opinion. But even for him, it wasn't easy. And that's where I met David Michelinie. Dave was always open immediately for me to be involved in helping create the stories. He appreciated what I had to offer, even though I was just the lowly inker. And I started talking to him about Iron Man, you know, which was, from the time I was a kid, this was the character that I wanted to do. I have always been a science buff. So with Iron Man, it was kind of that way. I always said that if you can believe that the suit works, everything else will work. All you got to do is make the suit look believable. Make it look like it functions. And that was really my idea going in, was make the suit look functional. Looking at Iron Man and saying, okay, parts of him are organic, parts of him are not. So I just started inking him that way. In terms of approaching Iron Man, it was always just making it believable to me. I mean, people talk about, you know, that whole Dr. Doom story, the first Camelot thing. I had always argued that Dr. Doom should have been the Iron Man villain, not, you know, the Fantastic. I know he's belongs to the Fantastic Four, but if there ever was a character who was the antithesis of Tony Stark, it was Dr. Doom. They were the same guy on two sides of the coin. He was, I mean, both monarchs, both highly educated, you know, both very sophisticated guys. Never were there two characters meant to fight each other in the history of comic books than Dr. Doom and Iron Man, you know? And the fact that they maintained a mutual respect for each other, even though they hated what the other person stood for. What makes Tony Stark different than everyone else in the Marvel Universe, and it's the world that he lives in, that he operates in. The corporate structure, the world of high finance, the world of industrial exploration. I mean, the fact that he was a scientist who made money off what he did. And that's really all we tried to do with that, was we put characters around Tony. Each one of them served a purpose, served a different side of Tony.
We'll drop in Jim Rhodes. He's a pilot, and then we'll start delving into his backstory. And he was the guy that Tony met when he was, you know, in Southeast East Asia, having just become Iron Man, who helped him get back to the States.
You know, Rhodey was that confidant, the guy that he could trust with his life. You know, the guy that, you know, that had his back all the time, you know. And you know, Beth was obviously the person who took care of him emotionally. Here's Tony Stark's day. He comes in, Mrs. Arbogast hands him a piece of paper, he signs it. A factory goes up in New Jersey. She comes in, hands him a piece of paper, he signs it, a satellite gets built. Another piece of paper, signs it, they close a factory in Guatemala. You know, 10,000 people are out of jobs. He designs something. He goes to his drawing board, designs something. It's sent down to the technical crew or whatever, to the technicians. They build it, they do all that kind of stuff. Sales and manufacturing go to it. He never sees the damn thing until it's in orbit. Who could really live that way? It's a different set of problems, a different track, a different things like that. And that was one of the things that I thought about with Iron Man. This is the only character I think you could really do that with, where you start thinking about alterations in the design to fit specific needs and tasks. I believe the stealth armor was the first, but you know, Dave and I had already discussed several different options: the space armor and the undersea armor, and so forth and so on. I'm going to quote Dave Michelinie here: that it was never our intention to do anything relevant. We were paid to basically do the next episode of Iron Man. Just that particular issue, alcoholism was the bad guy. Instead of the Dr. Doom or somebody like that, it was the Bob. That was our villain of the month. And that's really the way we treated it. We built everything up to that, but the point of it is, it was never, we never attempted to be relevant. It just, in the corporate world, what gets guys? What causes the downfall? Usually it's greed or it's sex and drugs, right? Well, we couldn't do the sex part, right? Alcohol wasn't talked about all that much, really, to be honest with you, especially with kids, you know, in that particular era. But, you know, we treated it as we intended to, as the bad guy.
When we set out doing that Extrema story, we weren't even certain that it would be a permanent thing, because on one level, it seems like it flies in the face of the concept. And I've certainly heard from, you know, some real hardcore Iron Man fans of days gone by that, no, this isn't Iron Man, because Iron Man's, the whole point is he's got a suit of armor. He shouldn't have, powers built into himself. But I think, two things that it had going for it is, one, Warren Ellis is a fantastically talented writer, and two, Warren is Tony Stark. Warren is so far ahead of the curve in terms of reading up on the science. He's so fascinated by the technology and the way it's going to change our society and the way it's going to impact on us individually that he just got down to the core of it. Tony Stark, as sort of, I think the term that Warren was sort of tossing around at the time was, he's sort of like the test pilot of the future. That he's there, he's the first guy there, and he's going to go out and investigate all the possibilities and see what all this stuff does and how it affects him and how it could affect the world, and thus, in doing so, sort of beta tested for everybody else. Beyond that, it was beautifully digitally painted by Adi. So it had a really sophisticated, sleek, modern look. It was pretty successful, and it got people interested again, and the character started to pop a little bit, and then consequently we went on and did Civil War and did all the stuff that came after that. And right now, the movie notwithstanding, Iron Man is really poised in a position within the Marvel line and within the Marvel universe where he's like the most important character there is. He's the hub around which everything circles. And it all kind of stems, stepping stone-wise, from the work that Warren and Adi did.
So what happened was Joe Quesada, the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, got talking to me in email one evening about Iron Man, which was a character they were putting new creative teams on once every year or two, and it was never quite working for Joe. This is a character who is a test pilot for the future as his own redemption, which is really the thrust behind the Extremis graphic novel. And Joe responded to that take and said, well, off you go then. He was an arms dealer. There's no two ways around it. While that is what built his fortune, therefore allowing him to be a technologist, he wasn't actually being that at the genesis of the character. He was just a man who made bombs. And he's running away from that. The only way he can look himself in the mirror, as far as I'm concerned, is to be Iron Man, is to be that figure of futurism. After I agreed to take a shot at Iron Man for Joe and develop a new take, the next thing was finding the artist, and Joe being Joe already had an artist in mind, was Adi Granov. A comics artist has a lot of very strange jobs. There's certainly the director to a large extent. Cinematography is something that's often shared between the writer and the artist. I created a character called John Pillinger, who is a television journalist, very much based on John Pilgrim. Because in all those years of publication, from what I could find, Tony Stark had very rarely been brought up to account by the real world. So I wanted someone there to lay it out both for him and the audience. You're an arms dealer. That doesn't mean you just made a couple of bombs. John Pillinger is there to remind him that somewhere in the world right now, someone is dying because of something he's made, and they're never going to let him run away from it. I really wanted to try and ground the character. It's less a superhero graphic novel than it is a science fiction novel, and that to me required Tony Stark to be a real person. He shouldn't be someone who can just put on a costume and fly above his concerns or the concerns of the world. He's a man who made a moral compromise in his youth. It was simply easier and faster to build a fortune by selling arms than it was to do it pretty much any other way. When I wrote Extremis, I moved the timeline on, and I have Stark being struck by shrapnel, not in Vietnam, but in a desert location that could very well be Afghanistan. In Iron Man Extremis, Tony Stark is probably not yet 30, and he's a man passionately interested in bringing on the future, but he doesn't really know what that is yet. He's very scattered, in the book, he's working on 12 things at once, hoping that one of them will be the golden key to unlocking a future that he can live with. That's why there are so many of us interested in futurism. We don't know which path is going to break. We don't know which one is going to turn out to be the way through the woods. The character Sal in the book was a mentor to Tony and Maya. The thing about Sal in the book that makes him stand apart from both Tony and Maya is that he doesn't have the passion. I think he never really had the passion. I think that's what he admired most in Tony and Maya. It wasn't a huge wrench for him to just say, the hell with it to everyone. He didn't have the passion and need for redemption that Tony has. I think the germ of the extremist process that I created for the graphic novel was reading somewhere a long time ago that the human brain retains a template of what the body should look like, and it refers to that when repairing wounds. And it simply struck me that if that could be hacked, then you could make the body do all kinds of interesting things. 2, some years later, a suit that he could fold up and carry in a briefcase. 2, as you see at the start of the graphic novel, something that has to be shipped in a crate or hangs on chains in his garage, very much going back to the tank model, which made a little sense in terms of the standard process of technological development, which is to make things smaller and more effective at the same time. So attacking it from that aspect and constantly keeping the title of the thing in mind, it seemed to me to only make sense if he was wearing the Iron Man suit, if you like, at all times, that he became an Iron Man, that a large amount of the suit itself was stored inside his body, using what you presume is some kind of nanotechnological process. So it actually fulfills physical functions as well as laying there and potential inside his body. So yeah, the Iron Man suit is mostly contained inside his bones. Well, with Extremis, it was my job to reboot the character, to reinvent the character and present new situations and conflicts for him, which I think the book did.
I think probably the favorite part in Extremis for me is in second issue when Malin walks into the FBI building, and I think that's where I really hit my stride as a storyteller. I think that's when I started feeling comfortable with just telling or choreographing scenes, and I think the action in it came out quite good. The way I approached the design of the suit in Extremis particularly is I kind of try to add realism to my art, so it looks like something could actually, you know, with suspension of disbelief, actually function. Before our book, the suit was actually always in a briefcase, but then we thought when we did Extremis that how can you fit this giant suit into a briefcase? It just makes no sense. So it was outside of a briefcase, it was actually in a giant crate that would be shipped wherever he needed it. But then when he actually injects himself, then he uses this new suit, which is much smaller, and then I started thinking about memory medals, you know, so it can be folded. This is the kind of stuff that I really think about. So memory medals, so you could fold the suit and fit it in a suitcase, and then because he had some kind of power, magnetic powers, he could actually like maneuver the suit around him to actually then like fit onto him. Well, basically, first time Warren Ellis and I met, it was, I think, right, I was working on whichever the issue came before that. I think it was issue number 3. And I was telling him how much I like the original gray Iron Man armor, because it's just a clunky tank type of a thing. And a few weeks later, I get the script and he's written that scene into it because, and this is what he said, that he wrote it because I like that suit so much. I'm an illustrator before anything else, and I try to come up with striking images, at least in my opinion, and I try to compose images that will tell a story in a certain way. And when it comes to doing sequential art, comic book pages, I try to serve the story before creating beautiful images, but I try to create beautiful images at the same time, if that makes sense.
Iron Man in Civil War, I mean, ultimately Civil War is a story about Captain America and Iron Man, and to a lesser degree about Spider-Man as sort of the third lower point on that triangle. And it was that from the very beginning, as the story started to crystallize and the basic themes of freedom versus security kind of played themselves out. Those two characters, because they're so central to the mythos of Marvel, and they're both so central to the Avengers and the superhuman community. This is a character who'll do whatever needs to be done and take the weight on himself. That seemed to be a pretty interesting place to put him in Civil War, and to some degree, a surprising place, because again, the knee-jerk is Cap will be the guy that toes the line and Iron Man will not. As the story played out and as we figured it out, we got to the end where ultimately it's got to be the pro-registration side that comes out on top. And somewhere along the line there, one of us had the notion of, okay, where's that going to leave us? Let's put Tony in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. That puts him in another interesting place. It's like running a company, but completely different because it's a worldwide peacekeeping force. It's more military-oriented, but a lot of the same skills that he brings to running a company on an economic level can be played out against this larger scale thing. Tony became more and more the center point even beyond Civil War, all the stuff that we went after that, because he was the guy in charge. He was the man with the plan and the guy with the vision, and the guy that across the course of doing these things, putting these plans into place and running into conflict with guys that were his friends, did things that he knew were tough.
Tony Stark is a very difficult character to write, because he's a lot smarter than any writer who's ever going to tackle him. None of us can claim to know how to create anything technical. We're totally faking it. He's also a much more sophisticated character. His lifestyle, his background. I don't know any comic book writers that are trust fund babies that really know that side of society, it's all got to come out of our heads. He's a tough character to write in that sense, but it's also a lot of fun. The Inevitable came out of the relaunch that Warren Ellis and Adi Granoff did, which was a great relaunch, but they weren't using any of his villains. They weren't using any of his rogues gallery, and Iron Man has a great rogues gallery. And those villains specifically, if I could have jammed more villains into that story, I would have. But 3 seemed to be the limit. But I loved those characters. Iron Man has this very specific kind of rogues gallery. They're also technologically based. Whether it's the living laser or the Ghost with his stealth suit, or Spy Master, who's sort of the industrial espionage side of an Iron Man story that's also very interesting to me. So I wanted to bring back those characters for a modern audience. The way I tell these stories whenever I'm doing a sort of historical tale is I always, in my mind, set them in the present. Write them as though they're happening right now. There's a rule of thumb with comic books. It doesn't matter when it came out. Whenever you're reading it, it's happening right now. That's why comics are written in the present tense. Narrative captions, are written in the present tense, because when you're reading a comic, the idea is it's happening right now. So my feeling was the Mandarin is Iron Man's quintessential enemy. His opposite number. Magic versus, mechanical. Technology versus mysticism. It's a great opposite number pairing. But their first encounters didn't have a lot of mythic power. They were sort of one in a series of stories that were being told at the time. I don't think anyone knew that the Mandarin would grow into Iron Man's quintessential foe. Eric Canetti, I've known him for years. We worked together in comics a couple times when he was first breaking in, and always loved his work, but it was so technically precise. And it was kind of a Jeff Darrow kind of thing going on. I just thought, man, you know, this guy is made to draw Iron Man. What I didn't expect, what he did inject into the work, is this life, this movement that comes from his years in animation.
At the moment, Dan and Charlie Knopf are writing Iron Man. Dan was the creator of Carnival, the television series, and does a lot of writing there, and Charlie is his son, young and up-and-coming screenwriter and comic book writer. They sort of picked up the baton from where Warren had left it and have carried it forward, doing all of the Civil War connectivity stuff and all of the Iron Man Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. arc and all of this sort of thing.
Yeah, the Knopfs really brought in a very real-world espionage kind of flavor to Iron Man, which I think was really fantastic, and a real-world sort of tech. I mean, it definitely feel the weight of the world on Tony Stark and on the Marvel Universe within their story. So they've just done a great job of it. I mean, they really are writing it like a TV show.
When I was doing Carnival, I actually turned on some of my staff to graphic novels. I said, I want you to read these to sort of get a sense of the type of storytelling. And after Carnival ran its course, I got a call from, actually wasn't even a friend of mine, said, hey, I was talking to a guy, he's at Marvel, they really want you to do a comic book. And I talked to them and they said, yeah, you know, we'd love for you to do it.
It's funny because they offer him this thing. And he calls me up, and I know this because he calls me up on April 1st. And you know, I've been reading comic books since I was a kid. And he calls me up on April 1st. He goes, hey Charlie, are you interested in doing a comic book with me for Marvel? And I go, yo, shut the F up, man. This is a joke. Why are you messing with me like this, you know?
Yeah, it would be
he goes,
typical.
no, I know, this would be typical him. And he goes, no, I am serious. And you know, after I changed my pants, I called him back and we sat down and we discussed. And what was the criteria? You said no. I want to do a character.
Oh yeah, no. They said, do you want to do one of our characters? And I said, well, you know, I'd really like to do one of your characters that's underperforming. Yeah. I'd really like you to find me a character that's underperforming, and I'd like one that's a little bit morally ambivalent. And well, he said, well, how about, you know, which one would you? I said, well, my first choice would be Iron Man. I thought, well, they won't give me Iron Man. And then he called me and said, yeah, we'd love you to do Iron Man. And I said, well, okay, if I'm going to do it, I have to do it with my son, because I'm so out of touch with superhero books. And he knows the idiom inside out. And I also knew that I had my plate full with television and film projects. I knew Charlie was talented. It was a little bit of a leap. It was a little scary. I knew I had the craft to help him with his scene work, and I knew he knew the ins and outs and what you can and can't do with a comic book. So he does all the first drafts.
Yeah.
So he carries sort of the, you know, he does the heavy lifting, which is looking at a blank page. And then we break story together. We'll break story, then he'll do the first draft, then I'll sit down and we'll sit at the typewriter and work together. And when I'm making changes, he's learning bits and pieces of craft that I kind of more or less had to learn by myself. It was sort of nerve-wracking because I thought, what if he has no talent? What if he can't do it? And then how do I deal with that? And I certainly didn't want to be sitting there and carrying him. Now, I had the advantage of having worked with my father at one time in a very different business, but I understood the psychological aspects of it. So I'd tread that minefield before. So I knew, you know, I know where there's warning signs, you know. But no, he was able to pick it up right away. You can't teach talent. That's the only thing you can't teach. When we came in, we just want to write a kick-ass book. Yeah. We want to write a book that works. But I think when we came in with, it would be the height of hubris. I mean, look, Warren Ellis is a master. I'm not going to follow Warren Ellis I mean, it's like everything he gave us in Extremis was a gift.
Execute program, you could see the curve as we were moving through it. Like, you know, the earlier issues, when we got to the later issues, we're going, you know. They said, just finish your story. You're going to be well into Civil War by the time you finish. So we kept track of what was going on with Civil War, and we really saw Tony as being Lincoln-esque. We were sort of, when we looked at registration as an issue, if it was real, absolutely. And really, again, I think the idea is that we saw him as almost like Abraham Lincoln. That he's behind a cause that's costing lives, that's unpopular, that's costing friendships. But he sticks to his guns.
From what I understand from talking to artists, it's difficult to have expressions with a lot of these superheroes, especially with Iron Man. He's got this big iron mask on.
Yeah, we always go in close to the eye slit.
Yeah, what we really like about both Patrick and Rob is that their expressions are so good. Now, granted, you know, with Iron Man, we have to get in close, like you said, get in close to the iron slit. Rob had this great scene in one of our issues where Maria looks up and she says, what's your ETA? And he goes, right freaking now, and flies over Maria, and he's got this great shot of her looking up, and her eyes are, what the hell's going on? I think that's really important.
What I like about Iron Man and Tony Stark, what really works for me, I mean, actually when I'm drawing Iron Man, I enjoy drawing the Tony Stark scenes more than I do the Iron Man ones. So many of Marvel's characters are radiated and become a monster, or bit by a spider, or cosmic rays. And Iron Man was, I mean, I don't know if you can say you identify with a guy who's a handsome billionaire who gets all the ladies, but he was still a real guy, and he's a self-made superhero. He's a superhero because he wants to be, because he's the engineer as a superhero. You know, he's superhero by design. You know, I mean, that's unique. You know, I love that. The double-edged sword of drawing Iron Man was, on the one hand, you had these supporting characters in Tony Stark who were very emotive and going through extreme emotional strain, and on the other hand, you had to draw a guy with a faceplate whose emotions were hidden beneath the armor. I mean, I enjoy the emotional aspects of it. You know, with Maya and Sal, I thought the Knopfs did a wonderful job with those characters. Some of my favorite scenes were what was going on with them. And I don't know if Daniel was ever aware of this, but from some pictures online I saw of him, I started to base my drawings of Sal off of how he actually looked. I mean, I actually think maybe Daniel might be even more extreme looking. I think the picture I saw he had a beret and some braids in his beard, but definitely there was a bohemian approach to Sal that I picked up on from just what I knew about Dan. When you're doing something like Iron Man's armor and you have to draw sideways, front, back, forward, in comics you draw every conceivable angle. Not having that full field of information will actually, by accident, will bring about a style of your own. Fortunately, there are enough people out there still that just love the beauty of like a line approach, you know, as opposed to photorealism. Color-wise, I was really looking for more of a pastel look, so that the openness and the simple lines would come out more. When I was first offered the assignment, I was actually out on vacation with my family, and my editor called on his cell phone and said, you know, how would you like to do Iron Man? And, you know, right away I want to scream, are you kidding? Yeah, of course. And she told me that the Knopfs would be writing it, and that they had done Carnival for HBO. And it just got better and better as far as I was concerned. To me, great comics start with great stories. And these guys, I knew were going to write great stories. When I think about the project, I remember there was an awful lot of research about actual places. They say London, they don't just say London. It's Piccadilly Circle. It's there's a library, a specific library I had to draw a research scene in. There were a lot of places like that where they used exact locations. So you ready to go? Mm-hmm. This is my daughter Genevieve, and she wanted to get on this DVD too. So she did a drawing of Iron Man. As you can see, the Kuberts and the Ramitas have something to look out for here. I think it's pretty impressive myself. What do you think?
I think it's good too.
Great.
So Genevieve, how old are you?
I'm 8.
And how long did it take you to do this?
You spent a couple
I would
hours on
say,
it last night.
yeah, a couple of hours pretty much.
She came in and said, I want to draw something. And I said, well, why don't you draw one of the characters that Daddy draws?
Then I said yes.
Yeah, so.
Yes.
Do you like Iron Man?
Yeah, he's cool.
I've just written a serial called Ultimate Human, and this is a whole other kettle of worms entirely, because it's what they call the ultimate version of Tony Stark. And the idea was that the Ultimate books would represent all these old characters as if they were new once again, to introduce an entirely new generation to the properties. One of whom, of course, is Tony Stark, Iron Man. And Ultimate Human presents what I refer to as Ultimate Iron Man and Ultimate Hulk. These two characters have been re-envisioned for this new line of books, so I found myself writing Tony Stark again. The Tony Stark of the Marvel Ultimate line. He's a cheerful drunk who has a brain tumour the size of a golf ball, oddly enough. Smells of chemotherapy drugs, needs a team of at least 8 people to load him into his Iron Man suit. It's a very different take on the character. It wasn't mine. That Iron Man was developed by a writer called Mark Miller. Ultimate Human, as I say, presents these two characters together. In that universe, their Bruce Banner, their Hulk, is someone who became the Hulk after taking a flawed chemical process that would make him superhuman. Whereas their Tony Stark is a full-bore futurist. This is a man who plans 10 years into the future. And the Iron Man suit is very much part of a grander game, a broader plan than anyone really knows the extent of. So they both come from the intent of developing superhuman abilities, and they've both in their own ways gone horribly wrong.
What is it about Iron Man? He's a character that can be reinterpreted for each new generation in a way that more iconic characters can't.
I think what makes Tony Stark so interesting to me is that I happen to really love conflicted characters. I love characters that have sort of a dark edge to them, that they sort of walk that line, that if they step one, go a little bit to the left, they may be in the dark or in the light. And that really appeals to me, and the fact that he's just so smart and so Machiavellian, and not unlike myself actually, that really attracts me to the character. He's not just a cookie cutter, superhero or hero. He's a guy with a bit of a past and a bit of an edge to him.
Iron Man is a very conscious superhero. His creation was very conscious. He had to do it, and it's a conscious choice to continue to be Iron Man. I mean, I'm talking about just the original premise of he has the heart problem, he needs to wear the chest plate. He could have come back from that captivity and simply worn the chest piece, gone on as Tony Stark, and just gone on with his life. But he made a conscious choice to keep going as Iron Man. He saw some kind of greater good and continuing on with that.
It wasn't about the armor, it was about the guy inside. And that was always what the stories were about, the guy inside.
I've always steered away from using visual effects whenever possible. I think that there are certain things you can't achieve otherwise, but in the past I've always been reticent to use visual effects to the extent that other filmmakers might. That being said, in the last few years, there have been a lot of wonderful visual effects movies where it's beginning to become seamless even to me, and I'm a person who understands the way that they work, and I oversee them. Certainly in doing a movie like Iron Man, there's no way to do this film without them. And so the balance that you try to strike as a director, I think, is to mix up the visual effects with practical effects in a way where you start to forget where one begins and the other ends.
We looked at all the vendors that we could have doing the special effects on this, and we isolated different companies all over the world that we thought would be good. We looked at them for specific tasks that we thought they might be the best at, and within that we looked at a bunch of tests that they did. Right now we have 3 companies doing the visual effects for Iron Man. We have Industrial Light and Magic in San Francisco doing the lion's share of the work. It's the hardest work, I think. The Orphanage, also in San Francisco, which are ex-ILM people and now have a smaller company, and they're doing some of the smaller stuff. And then we have a very small house in Vancouver, Canada, called the Embassy, who's doing the Mark I sequences, which is the crudest suit, the one he makes out of spare parts.
Doing Iron Man, it's something. It's been a lot longer process. It's more like a marathon than a race, but it's been something that everyone's been really into doing.
We started with the scan that we were given, and the scan didn't include all of the pieces, so we had to go in, add pieces that weren't included in the scan, and adjust things that maybe weren't entirely accurate. So there was a lot of remodeling that had to be done to get it to the final state. And then we had to also do what we call unwrapping, which is you give this look, you basically flatten out all the pieces so you can then texture it with photos or hand-painted textures. We were also given a lot of high-res images of Robert Downey because there's a few shots where he approaches camera. The suit comes right by camera. And so using those images, again, we have to like flatten it out to get facial textures going.
The first Mark suit has all the different signatures of all the parts that are on it. So, you'll see a little bit of paint from one, an insignia of Stark Industries from another.
Little details like spinning fans in the back and things like that were added too. We did also rig up these pieces. These have the drive belts that kind of control his legs. So every time you move the leg up, everything rotates to correspond.
Well, it's pretty damn close to the actual practical guy. I think we can cut back and forth, and it's pretty seamless, I think.
Here is a mocap sequence that we got that they shot down in LA at Giant. And we got the mocap and we transferred it onto the rig of our 3D model. It's somewhat imperfect when it first comes in. This is the mocap of one of the sequences where he's walking down a hill with his flamethrower going. Once we get that and we map it onto our rig, it looks a little bit like that. So there's all kinds of problems with the shoulders and with his head. And once we clean that up, we end up with something looking a little bit more like this.
This is based on a still shot. So we have a still plate that was actually scanned at eFilm at 4K so that we can move in on the plate and actually do a camera move down through it that's added into post. But anyway, we take all those layers, which are the CG Iron Man. There's computer-generated smoke that goes in front of him as well to blend him back into the background. The CG reflection pass, and then color correcting. We even have little Robert Downey's eyes in there, and he's blinking up and down. Actually, a little bit. He has a little blinking, and he follows motion. So we move a null somewhere where we think the insurgent should be, and his eyes will track and follow them in that area where we think it should be looking. So this is one thing we did where, for one thing, the guy in the suit could not stand up like this or bend in that position. Even when we motion captured the actor, there's still some issues where you would see pass through. His hand may move and his forearm may intersect with his bicep, or his hip may intersect with something else. Like right in here, you can see this has to be really close where it's actually moving and not intersecting with his hip to make it look real. And then once the CG is done, it comes down here, and the compositors put everything else together and make it look real. This is a really interesting shot here because actually the director, Jon Favreau, is actually the motion capture actor in this particular scene. And the original shot was done with the practical guy in the suit. There was a little bit of a stumble and a bit of a weird move at the end after he did the punch, and the production really wasn't all that happy with it. And we're working on this shot right now, so you'll see that this is a much less final looking shot. Iron Man is really rough looking. This is a low res render, but you can actually see John's motion capture in there, and he's done a really good punch on the guy, sent him flying, and it's just a much more heroic stance, which is cool. And it's good that John got to get in that suit, and he can tell his friends for years to come how he got into Iron Man's suit.
Everyone in our industry wants to make shiny metal robots, you know? So having a big metal robot guy running around blowing things up is kind of your dream job. I remember talking to John Nelson way back, and we were talking about, well, what are we going to do with Iron Man? Because we've got Robert Downey Jr., who's an amazing character actor and is all about the face and the eyes, but we're sticking him in this metal suit where nobody's going to be able to see him. How are we going to solve that problem?
Gauge heads-up display? Check. 4-door preferences from home interface. Will do so.
19 months ago, I walked into visual effects supervisor John Nelson's office, and on his wall, he had a picture from 2001, A Space Odyssey, of Dave in his helmet with all the reflections on his face in the slit scan sequence. And I said, well, what's that doing on the wall? And he said, well, come with me. And we walked over to the storyboard artist, and they had drawn these shots of Tony inside his mask. But they weren't inside his mask because there was this depth to it with graphics in front of his face. And I said, that's going to be the coolest thing in this movie.
The HUD was in many ways kind of the dream job that we always are sort of dying to get at the orphanage. I mean, you know, we're a visual effects house, and oftentimes we are asked to do visual effects where it's like, make this jet look exactly like a jet, or make this explosion look exactly like you know exactly what it looks like. And the HUD was one of these things where make something that you've never seen before, that nobody's ever seen before, but yet something that everybody thinks is really cool.
And it's like a dream.
We have many of these shots where you actually see Tony flying and you see him doing his thing, but then we actually see it through Tony's eyes looking out. And that's a big challenge, to make all of that work in a way that keeps it all the spectacle within a believable sphere.
As a graphic designer, you're constantly striving to make what we consider a good design. And good design always starts with, what's our playing field? What are we trying to do here? What are our constraints? Every single widget that's in these shots, every single thing that's there has been thought about. The audience may not pick up on what that is. They just know they can relate to it because it's intuitive. And that's a word that came up over and over again in this HUD design process is it intuitive? Every widget was supposedly a collapsed, complex mechanism. But once it was activated, it would explode open in Z-axis space. So information is simple at first, but then becomes more complicated and revealed as you need it. The other notion was that it's sometimes Jarvis is bringing up information to him, and sometimes he's calling information from Jarvis.
Sir, it appears that his suit can fly. Duly noted. Take me to maximum altitude. With only 15% power, the odds of reaching that... I know the math! Do it!
John Nelson came to me and said 3 things had to happen. 1, it had to be performance driven. You had to always feel Robert, what he was doing, and you couldn't obscure his performance. You had to let it drive what happened. 2, you had to let the Z-axis, you had to really feel the Z-axis space in the HUD. So you wanted to feel the depth of when graphics came to him and how it was displayed. And 3, you should always have what he called an alpha event, or something that it was doing at that moment. So each shot has one thing, at least one thing that you could point to and say, this shot's about targeting. This shot's about horizon lock. So once we sort of figured that out, it drove the rest of the process. Our approach on the design of all the HUDs together was that the Ironmonger HUD was the HUD that Stark Industries released to the military. So it's a bare bones, aggressive fight battle HUD. And so we used sort of this vector style of graphics, and Jon Favreau sort of referenced these kind of asteroids and that level of graphics. And so we use that as sort of the touchstone for the Monger HUD. And it's aggressive, and it's mean, and it's a little bit primitive in sort of what you would expect the military to have. Then we went to Tony, we said he would take that technology and make it his own. He would make it slick just like he is. He would really think about the UI design.
You know, we had so many conversations about color. The 80s was kind of like amber was high tech, and then in the 90s it kind of went into blues and cyan. So we went with a cyan, which was not quite a blue and yet not quite a green.
If you notice in the beginning of the HUD work, there are 2 modes. He's in sort of the beginning analysis mode, and then he switches into flight mode, and all the widgets sort of move around and they do this sort of conversion process. We said, we need to show progression, because all of Tony's technology shows progression throughout the movie. So by the time he gets to the Mark III, it's just one HUD, whether he's on the ground or whether he's in the air, and that was a conscious choice to show the progression. So it was funny because Wesley Sewell, who was an additional supervisor for the production on the show, came to me when I was sort of doing my early look dev on the HUDs, and he said, you know what would be cool? White HUD. And I looked at Wes, I said, that's a great idea. And we can use color to accent.
The white interface is the cleanest, the simplest. In a way, it's like the least obvious and the most obvious at the same time. Because we thought, simplify is going to make it really clean and simple.
I think that that's what makes the Mark III successful, is that it is predominantly white, and that you have color, pops of color for attention. Boom, the power's low. Boom, right here we're targeting. All these things come up because of the color.
The Mark II, there's kind of a new widget for everything. There's a radar widget, there's a speed widget, there's like there's a diagnostics widget, there's all these different things. Then we thought there should be one, we call it the Omega widget, one widget that has this kind of like, sort of like an iPod, sort of like a DVD player, north, south, east, west, kind of a really basic design that we all know and understand, with 4 quadrants. So in its rest state, we have navigation at the top, sort of health at the bottom, power on this side, and diagnostics on that side, and some targeting and some other information. But then, when he actually looks at it, there should be a lot more information available. So this whole bottom thing, which used to be just a single power level, then expands out, and we can see how it's got all of these new calipers, and they all, from Tony's perspective, looking through it, it explodes out in Z away from him. So that's the power side of it. Then the health side of it, at first there's a couple parameters for the health, and then it explodes out and shows him a little Iron Man and his own kind of thing. And then the navigation is the same way. Extra controls kind of pop up.
I see all the great work that those guys in the orphanage did to make the HUDs great. And my hat's off really to Dov Rock and his crew of people up there at the orphanage. Jonathan Rothbart, the overall supervisor, did a great job with these HUDs, and I'm really happy with it.
Jarvis, sometimes you gotta run before you can walk.
Time to hit the button!
It's funny, you go into a project like Iron Man and you say, okay, well, we've done robotic sort of things, we've done vehicles, you know, this should be okay.
Kill power.
This film has a real unique difference from robot films in that the characters are you know, they're human beings inside these suits. They're more like knights in armor.
In this film, the challenges were to sort of take a armor that he creates for himself and extend that in computer graphics in a way that you buy completely as being something that Robert Downey Jr. is wearing.
Please try not to move.
What's going on here?
Let's face it, this is not the worst thing you've caught me doing.
I went over and talked to some of our best hard surface model people, Bruce Holcomb and Ron Woodall, and basically said, oh look, I've got this project coming called Iron Man, we have to do a test. And they jumped out of their seats and hit the roof laughing, and it was like, yes!
We had just sort of not maybe a month prior, not having heard anything about, the project starting. Maybe a month prior, started seriously talking about trying to do something with it again. And he and I both had made the backgrounds on our machines Iron Man related, images, just to sort of daily inspire one another.
And he used to say, we're never going to get this thing done. It's a big pipe dream. And then that's when Ben did come and kind of mentioned it. And he basically said, I told you they were going to do it. Now they got it, and now you can't do it.
It's interesting, Jon Favreau's approach to filmmaking, which makes it really great to work with him, is it's almost Altman-esque, which is kind of an odd thing that you see. You don't normally run into that with visual effects. A really gratifying side of that is that you get to contribute ideas, and it's a collaboration, and he would challenge us. Jon Favreau's approach to the creatures, the way they work, he didn't want it to be kung fu-y. He wanted it to be more like, bare-knuckle brawling.
He definitely has like kind of the cool library in his head of, cool YouTube stuff.
Jon Favreau is very much about invisible visual effects supporting the story. And we talked a lot about stressing what the suit could do and not creating shots just to show off the visual effect there. We want to create a shot to tell the story and tell it well.
Iron Man didn't feel like it was approached like a superhero movie. It felt like it was approached like something with more realism.
We started off by referencing a lot of the comic book art, like the early artwork that Jack Kirby had done, and later on I think Steve Ditko had done in terms of the tech and things like that. So say, his energy is, rendered a certain way in the comic book, his RT energy and his chest RT energy. But how does that translate onto a photorealistic environment, say on screen, where, you have to believe that this energy is powerful enough to, shoot a car out of the way or shoot him through the sky like a fighter jet. So that's when we started referencing a lot of real-life, real-world instances where this technology, what does this type of technology look like?
Like a dream.
We actually put a lot of work into saying, okay, based on the design of the suit, how would he then use this to fly? How would he make his flaps come out? What would he use to steer? That sort of thing. Tony's suit is so tricked out and fully featured, and bits fold out of it, and he's got weapons that pop up from it. And we actually build a whole underlayer to the suit to try and make it you could really see, I can kind of get a sense of how this thing's driven and how it protects him and makes him strong.
All of the under-tech stuff that is underneath the suit kind of got developed as we went along through the movie. And there are many shots of Robert Downey Jr. with a lot of the under-mech on his arms and then on the boots, which I think they made practically as well.
Sequence early on where he's tested all his flying rig, and he's made, got his what we call repulsor technology thrusters, the things that actually propel him, and he's made a suit, a flying suit that he's testing. And so we've got these big tracking shots that go around the silver suit as it starts folding pieces out and testing the flying surfaces. So there's these shots which we'd shot with the practical suit where the camera dollied around the practical suit.
But we ended up, replacing it in these shots because we really needed just everything to move. But we had, it gave us really good reference, and then we could, just make it that bit sweeter. It's just so much fun to see all those pieces moving. And so that's a lot of, again, in terms of the design of the suit, it was taken to a certain stage in the practical suit, and then once we got into the computer world and we really wanted to move things and have bits move, then, we sort of modified things so that we could get a lot more action out of it, a lot more interest.
The goal was to kind of not make him so much of a transformer, more as like his armor is unified. And that's, I think we wanted to get away from the vacuum form look and more of like the parts were mechanized for a purpose.
Interestingly, what happens for that shot is we do a match move on it where we try to get the position of the camera and the position slightly of the creature, the suit. Then our animator and creature dev person comes in and start moving all the pieces. And then we go in the long process of lighting these. So this is a take where we have the real one, and on the side we have our CG one.
Getting the metal look on both the Mark II, where he's unpainted and it's this kind of brushed metal look, and the Mark III, where it's the red and gold, has been really tough.
It was a struggle to get that brushed metal looking right on the Mark II, but we sort of realized that we basically got there when Jon Favreau and John Nelson, the client-side effects suit, they started forgetting which bits were the real suit and which bits were the brushed metal suit. That sort of marriage of the CG and the real, where you're not sure where one ends and one, that's something we always strive for. In one scene, we'd filmed Robert in a helmet and very little else. Initially, there was a slightly different take on that whole event. Iron Man was going to crash land on the roof, and he was going to be trying to rewire some stuff on the roof, and then Ironmonger was going to land on the roof and interrupt him. Now, during the evolution of the film, that changed, and Robert actually had thought he'd got rid of Ironmonger, that he's gone now. I've solved the problem. I've got to limp back home on, one RT because the other one's busted up, and somehow make it back to the Stark campus. And he gets back to the campus, ends up crash landing on the roof of the Tokamak building, and so, I'm done, take off my helmet, take off my glove. And none of that was in the original performance. It was basically the original performance was him sort of walking forward, talking, and then turning around. So the animators had to come in and put a front end on that because we still needed him to open the helmet and it be Robert Downey and it all to match. But the front end, he had to do a quite different performance while he was still Iron Man.
I'm almost out of power. I gotta get out of this thing. I'll be right there.
We actually went out and took a lot of photographs of all the sets that we were on so that we would have virtual backgrounds. We could recreate the sets in the computer on an as-needed basis. So then we had the option, when John wanted us to free up the camera.
And so we can actually move the camera around to places that it never was in the original footage. So then when we come back to the shot and do our version of it, we're panned a lot more to the right, and we've added all this in over here. This is all digital now, but we've mapped on photos that we took of the real set and then put in the sky so that we can really stretch it out and have a much bigger camera move than we had in the original shot. And then the jump is a lot bigger now with a more heroic moment in the middle of it. We tried to get what we've been calling a Marvel moment, which is sort of, here where he's really flying through the air, he's got his fist up and he comes down for this big punch.
In that case, what we did is we recreated the backgrounds, and then we had the buildings that are just behind, we had the city, and then the sky, and of course the two creatures, and that's what gives us the final result with a lot of smoke, and the effects of the repulsor that Jeff will talk about.
See some of the various types of elements that went into making like the RT effect on like the foot. There were a lot of sort of powerful, sort of flamey elements that then would get built up. We add sort of glowy cores. We added elements such as this one to sort of that we could animate on a shot-by-shot basis and sort of emphasize different aspects of it, make it feel more powerful at times when he really wanted to goose it and accelerate through the frame.
All right, let's see what this thing can do. What's SR-71's record?
The altitude record for fixed-wing flight is 85,000 feet, sir.
Records are made to be broken. Come on!
It's been great. It's been really fun. It's a great way to kind of shake things up.
I wish I had a suit like that.
Good job. Good job.
Iron Man was one of the most popular trailers of last summer, but controversy is sweeping the fan community today following the announcement that Paramount Pictures is planning to adapt the beloved trailer into a feature-length motion picture. Here to discuss the details is Entertainment Weekly writer Rory Covey. Rory, good to see you again. I take it there's some mixed reaction to this news. What are they going to do?
The Iron Man trailer is near and dear to a lot of fans' hearts, so you can imagine how worried people are about this news. Apparently, the plan is to expand that fast montage of very short shots seen in the trailer into full-length, distinct scenes. And in between those scenes, they plan to add additional scenes that weren't in the trailer.
Just doesn't seem like that would work.
That's right. The fact is, it's very difficult to make the character, story, action that work in a 90-second format also work when they're stretched out to 80 or 90 minutes.
Why do you think the trailer was so popular?
Well, it does tell an amazing story, Michael. A cocksure billionaire industrialist and inventor is kidnapped, but turns on his captors by designing an amazing mechanized suit of armor, ultimately becoming a hero to the world. It is a breathtaking 90-second thrill ride.
Surely then, Paramount realizes the tremendous financial risk of alienating the trailer's core fan base if they don't embrace the film properly.
Exactly, and that's
right.
why the studio has tried to reassure the public that everything that they love about the trailer will be incorporated into the movie adaptation, right down to actual lines from the trailer. And they are bringing Robert Downey Jr. back to reprise his role as Tony Stark.
Well, there would have been a real outcry if they had tried to cast someone else.
Yes, but that doesn't quell everyone's fears over whether the integrity of the trailer is in danger. For instance, the redheaded woman played by Gwyneth Paltrow.
Who's great.
She is great, and fans love her 3/4 of a second role. I mean, what if they gave her more lines or more scenes? I mean, who knows what they'll put in there between the point where he breaks out of the lab in the suit and the point where he flies in front of those jets? What if they put in a tedious romantic subplot that was 20 or 30 minutes long?
That doesn't sound good.
No.
Well, I guess we'll all be waiting to see how it actually turns out.
Yes, luckily for us, Paramount has announced that it plans to release the movie in theaters along with a group of 8 entirely new entertainment-packed trailers to screen before the film. So even if the movie is no good, hopefully the trip to the theater will be worth it anyway.
Rory Covey, thanks for being with us today. We'll see you later on.
Okay.
In Seattle today, a man has bruised 23 people in a punching spree.